minutes after 10. You could be forgiven for not noticing, but Nadhim Zahawi was, of course, sacked as the chair of the Conservative Party after he was found to have breached the ministerial code by failing to declare an HMRC investigation into his tax affairs. Prime Minister's own ethics advisor, Sir Laurie Magnus, found that he had made a serious breach of the code by not telling officials he was under investigation when he was made Chancellor by Boris Johnson. He also failed to officially declare that he'd paid a settlement to HMRC for tax avoidance when he was put in the cabinet by Liz Truss the following September, and when Rishi Sunak made him Tory chair and minister without portfolio in September. So an extraordinary example, really, of how a right-wing politician can rehabilitate himself from serious scandal, while Keir Starmer yesterday, you'll recall, was under attack for working for free to abolish the death penalty in former colonies. We use the phrase client journalism quite a lot on this programme, but there are days when the phrase doesn't seem to go far enough. And Zahawi's just one of them, attempting not only to gloss over his own scandalous recent past, but also to point fingers at others, calling, in his conversation with Nick earlier, calling for the former head of the Post Office to devote the rest of her life to charitable works. I'll say again, he was sacked for breaching the ministerial code, sacked by the current iteration of the Tory party. Almost unsackable cohort of charlatans and chancers. And yet he managed, perhaps uniquely actually, apart from, of course, Suella Braverman, he managed to actually get sacked. Even Dominic Raab would have hung on if he hadn't promised to resign in the event of being found to be a bully, because he was then found to be a bully, so he had to resign. But he would have tried to hang on if Keir Starmer hadn't pushed him into making that promise. So someone sacked for a breach of the ministerial code is able, through a combination of cynicism and opportunism, to use the Horizon Post Office scandal to cast themselves as a moral crusader. And that is a beautiful indication of how insane this story has now become. Danny Finkelstein, I beg your pardon, Milord Finkelstein, a former member, I think, of the Conservative Research Office, certainly a former speechwriter for David Cameron. He dedicates a whole page in Rupert Murdoch's Times to calling for Ed Davey's resignation over this issue. Davey certainly has questions to answer, but it's no coincidence that he's a Liberal Democrat, or rather was a Liberal Democrat member of the coalition government when Lord Finkelstein was writing speeches for its actual Prime Minister. But he casts himself today in the role of moral crusader, calling for the resignation of Ed Davey. I hesitate to put Nigel Farage in the same breath as Lord Finkelstein, because the latter is a valuable contributor to public discourse, whereas the former is, of course, simply the most stubborn skid mark on the underpants of British politics. But Nigel Farage has used the opportunity to call for Keir Starmer to answer questions about why he didn't do more to stop this scandal. And all of them remain silent about the fact that as Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak oversaw the award of billions, that's a B, lest you're in any doubt at all, billions of pounds worth of contracts to Fujitsu, the architects, of course, of the disastrous Horizon software, after the details of the scandal had emerged. I don't even know where you go with that. £3.6 billion during Sunak's time as Chancellor awarded to Fujitsu in solo and joint public sector contracts after the December 2019 ruling that was the focus of that ITV drama. So we are living in very, very strange times. Disgraced former chairman of the Conservative Party casts himself as a sort of caped crusader against malfeasance at the Post Office. Former speechwriter for the current Foreign Secretary and former Prime Minister goes after a member of that former Prime Minister's government and calls for him to resign over this scandal. And the beery flatulence made flesh that is Nigel Farage somehow sees himself as qualified to comment on Keir Starmer's culpability for a scandal caused by a company using software that was unfit for purpose, but which still received just shy of £4 billion worth of public money in contracts from the current government after the details of their scandal had emerged. And you think I exaggerate, don't you? when I talk about the incestuous relationship between right-wing politicians and right-wing media. You think I go a little bit too far sometimes when I tell you that they can pretty much do a lap of honour around a newspaper column or a television studio or a radio studio for being wonderful, upright people without it even being mentioned once that they got sacked for breaching the ministerial code and not telling prime ministers the truth about their own tax affairs. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive. It's all gone a bit bonkers now, hasn't it? I told you it would. I didn't think it would go this bonkers. I really didn't. I have to correct something from yesterday's programme. I suggested that the numbers weren't that extraordinary, but another caller, it was Jane, I think was her name, a TV producer who rang in towards the end of yesterday's conversation and pointed out that the consolidated figures would go through the roof. So by the time everyone's caught up on catch-up or watched it via different methods, that idea of us all sitting down at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, with a couple of glorious exceptions, it doesn't really apply anymore. But the programme Mr. Bates versus the Post Office has become ITV's best performing new drama for 3 years. It's hit about 9.2 million viewers and it's still rising. That was the first episode, I think. The figures are still rising. The series has pulled in viewing figures of 14.8 million on ITVX alone. The series was streamed 12.3 million times in 8 days. So those consolidated figures are going to continue to rise. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the combination of genuine lessons, if you like, substantive lessons, and the sort of almost hysterical moral panic that has now kicked in. You will know that shortly after we came off air yesterday, Paula Venels gave back her CBE. Partly perhaps in response to the scale of the petition calling for her to do precisely that, although more likely in response to the actual detail of the revelations that are now reaching a much, much wider audience than they had reached before. More than 100 further potential victims have come forward in recent weeks. And for reasons that we'll never be able to pin down precisely, the coverage of this story, the facts of which have been known for years, the facts of which were known when Rishi Sunak, as Chancellor, decided to award billions of pounds worth of contracts to the company responsible, ultimately, for the false imprisonment and the false conviction of hundreds of sub-postmasters. The facts are now reaching parts that no other form of media has managed to reach. And I don't quite get it. I don't quite get it. I think I understand this Zahawi, Farage, Finkelstein triangle rather better than I understand the rest of it, using this opportunity to score political points for your own self, in Farage's case, or your own party, in the case of Finkelstein and Zahawi. That's as old as the hills, and the fact that 80% of our print media certainly leans very, very heavily towards the Tory party gives them an almost free swing at the story and the freedom to use it as an attempt to pursue their own political vendettas. But for the rest of us, what are we taking away from this story? What are we learning? What is this story about? And what should... I'll tell you what I want to ask you today. I want you to tell me how you want this story to change the world. I think that there is an element of might being right. There is a presumption that a doughty, weighty institution such as the Post Office, populated by people with CBEs and fancy titles, must be correct, even when hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little people queue up to insist that it isn't. I think that there's racism involved in this. In fact, there's evidence of racism in some of the documents and paperwork attached. A disproportionate number of sub-postmasters from a South Asian background, and that perhaps has contributed to a failure to properly credit them with agency, never mind integrity. There's a David and Goliath element to it, and yet, of course, the Bible teaches us that David can kill Goliath. I guess we still haven't really learnt the lesson that might is not right, that size is not everything. And the noise now that everyone is deploying everywhere you turn, whether you're going after Paula Venables, whether you're going after Ed Davey, whether you're going after Keir Starmer, or whether you're going after the people that continue to give billions of pounds to Fujitsu and, of course, accept donations from them. That's a desperately important point. They continue to accept donations, I think, either from individuals at the top of Fujitsu or from Fujitsu itself. You are, of course, free to go after them as well. But what should we be paying attention to? That's what is the lesson that we should be learning from this story? I think we've lost sight of that. Priti Patel claiming that she'd been a tireless warrior on behalf of sub-postmasters, and it turned out that she maybe asked a couple of questions many, many years ago, but in 2016 she was boasting about giving a speech to their AGM. So the hypocrisy and the self-serving nature of right-wing politicians and their client journalists is on full display today. For once, I don't want to focus on that. I don't want to be distracted by that, by the Nadeem Zahawi Rehabilitation Society. I want to focus on what the lessons we should be learning are. What does this teach us? Because I hesitate to say I don't think we'll learn those lessons, whatever they are. But what should we be? What have you learned from the story? And what do you think society, and indeed my profession, the media, should learn from the facts? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. What have you learned about the society we live in from the post office scandal in general and the Mr. Bates versus the post office telling of that story in particular? And crucially, what do you think society should learn from this scandal? I don't know whether we'll open the door to wondering whether it will learn those lessons or not. I just want you to focus on what lessons should. This is really important. This is Hillsborough, Grenfell territory. This is where those who do not learn from history are condemned forever to repeat it. And there's a pretty grim Grenfell-related story in the news today as well. But I really want to know what lessons you think society should learn from this still unfolding scandal. 10:16 is the time. The number you need is 0345 6060973. 19 minutes after 10 is the time. So perhaps inevitably in this broken country, all of the people responsible for breaking it are using the post office scandal now, or many of the people responsible for breaking it, to pursue their own personal political vendetta, or just in the case of Farage, of course, yet another chapter in one of the longest tales of desperate attention seeking that the country has ever seen. But behind all of that noise lies genuine tragedy, and behind the genuine tragedy lies egregious scandal. And egregious scandal demands that lessons be learned. What are those lessons for you personally that society should take away from this extraordinary story? Clive's in Bodmin. Clive, what would you like to say?
Hello, good morning. Well, firstly, the post office scandal, it's appalling, and my heart goes out to those people. But my point is that this problem is endemic in franchising as a whole. The sub-postmasters were franchisees, and the franchisee industry itself is governed by the law of contract only, and not really a specific law for franchising. And what you have within this are large companies, corporations, effectively dealing with little people who are running small businesses. Now, when those small businesses come into a dispute with those franchisors, they're up against the number one factor, which is money. Taking these corporations to court is incredibly expensive and beyond the realms of affordability for most of these people. And I'm a franchisee myself.
So you've got no recourse to. I mean, it's a bit. The way you've described it, Clive, and I will hear your specific perspective imminently. But the way you've described it actually reminds me of libel. If someone really powerful libels you, there's actually very, very little you can do about it. because you can't afford £500,000 worth for legal fees, even though you know you're going to win.
That's so right. And what I saw, the documentary on TV, it just brought a lump to my throat. And what I saw there was corporate bullying, and I've seen that right the way across the board through franchising. And people can't afford, even though they're right, they can't afford to take the risk of suing these people or corporations, because they will just lead you down the road, and you'll run out of money, or you'll run out of inclination due to the fact that you need to protect your future with what little you've got left.
And your family. There was one case, wasn't there? I think the chap's name was Lee Castleton. I saw reported yesterday, and it was covered in the drama, where the lawyer for the post office contacted him personally and told him that we'll destroy you. Have a think about this. We'll destroy you. Think of your family. Take down your defence.
It's shocking. And within franchising, there is corporate bullying. There is. I need to be careful. But
no, I know. You better not name the company.
No, I'm not going to name anyone. But what can just twisting the truth and using their weight of money to quash individuals, which has led to bankruptcies, suicide. I mean, hopefully some franchisee lawyers would call in and substantiate this. But the story is not just isolated to the post office, albeit that is obviously the worst and most heinous situation.
No, I'm glad you've rung in. I'm glad you were listening today, because the David and Goliath element of it obviously is going to apply to many other sectors as well. The very simple idea that the entire system is skewed towards power and wealth, and never more so than in areas of law. And oddly, one of the protections you'd enjoy would be under human rights legislation in some contexts. And of course, this current government is desperate to start setting fire to elements of that as well.
Of course, your question was what would you like to be seen done? What would you like to see come from this? And if I'm talking franchisee specific and the law of contracts, which encompasses so many people, there's so many businesses, small businesses running in franchise, I'd like to see the ability for those people to be protected under the legal system so that they can take action and afford to do so. So a form of legal aid for that type of situation would be... Because
otherwise you'd need to rely on the auspices of someone like Jolly and Morm over at the Good Law Project to take up cudgels on your behalf. That's an enterprise in a space where Clive argues really public money should be in position. Thank you, mate. I'm sorry I can't find out more details about your personal position, but I think as we were both conscious, not least for some of the reasons that we've alluded to, we'd be on fairly thin ice with regard to right of reply and what have you. This is strong from No Hostages. When you look at every British miscarriage of justice, when have the powerful people or institutions responsible for the miscarriages ever paid for their wrongdoing? If the Bloody Sunday episode taught us anything, it is that while you might get an apology after decades of campaigning, the wrongdoers will never be convicted of anything. If you come close, they'll just legislate to make it impossible. So what would you add to that list? Bloody Sunday, Hillsborough, apologies galore, but no actual punishments or meaningful convictions. Grenfell, still unfolding, of course, and yet a sense perhaps already that proper punishment will probably not occur for people responsible for creating the context in which that tragedy could unfold. I would add to that list at the moment, I'd add COVID, actually. I'd add the COVID inquiry to that list. If you think any of these people are going to be held responsible for the deaths that they helped to cause, I've got a bridge I'd like to sell you. Clive, take care. Laura's in Raydon in Suffolk. Laura, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I think you asked what lesson should we learn from it. I think it's really important that we learn that there's no such thing as true democracy anymore. Corporate greed has its claws so deep into the very fabric of our society now. And that's a global issue.
Don't forget that this has come out as a consequence of democratic checks and balances. As a consequence of a free press, as a consequence of a cross-party political inquiry led by James Arbuthnot. I mean, the scandal has, albeit belatedly and unsatisfactorily and partially, the scandal has been exposed as a consequence of what I would describe as central platforms of democratic society.
Well, I'd say that were it not for the unwavering resilience and, 20 years of his life of Mr. Bates.
Windrush. Forgive me, I have to put Windrush on that list that I just made, and I apologise for not having it in there sooner. Yeah, it did, but it was 20 years of his life within the context of a democracy. I don't want to accuse you of hyperbole, but in an undemocratic country, it never would have come to court. He'd have been shot in an alleyway somewhere.
Well, you could say that, but it took so long. It took such a battle. It shouldn't have been that hard. And you said free press, but earlier you said sort of 80% of our media is right-leaning, and that's because 5 billionaires control 80% of the media we have in the UK. Not
quite anymore. Again, that's a Twitter meme. Richard Desmond hasn't owned the Express for some time, and Mirror and Express are owned by a public company called Reach. But you've got Murdoch and you've got Viscount Rothermere. I don't even think you can include the Barclay brothers on that list anymore. So it's only two. And I don't want to sound patronising when I talk about Twitter memes, but I think what we're describing is a weakening of democracy and a weakening of freedoms, not an abolition, because Computer Weekly, Private Eye, the BBC, Nick Wallace, even the Daily Mail serialised Nick's book about the Great Post Office scandal. So it's very rarely, Laura, that I find myself in this position. But I don't think things are quite as bad as you describe.
I suppose so. But that was going to be my point too. Yes. It would be that it shows that when enough of the population get behind something and demand justice. Yes, it does actually happen. So that would be another point.
Yeah, exactly. Contaminated blood scandal we'd put on this list of similar or comparable stories as well. Carry on. Final point.
Final point is if other TV producers want to sort of learn from this and get the next big hit, let's look at Nestle. You could make a fantastic TV program about dressing up as nurses, lying to African women and being responsible for hundreds of thousands of African babies dying from
has that not been
water.
Done? That's going back decades. I remember doing that story in my school newspaper in the 1980s. But I thought you were going to say something like Grenfell, or possibly I think I saw the wonderful Rachel Clark, who tweets, of course, as Dr. Oxford this morning, saying that there is a three-part series. There is a three-part series on the way depicting frontline NHS staff during COVID, commissioned by the same woman, in fact, that commissioned Mrs. Bates versus the Post Office. So I mean, there are a lot of things that you think Toby Jones should perhaps turn his attention to next. It's coming up to 10:30. Thank you, Laura. I'm sorry if I seemed a little bit schoolmasterish on that, but when you are in the business of putting out the truth, I think we've got to be even more careful with regard to the detail than the people who are in the business of essentially shilling for right-wing governments and helping disgraced former politicians rehabilitate themselves in real time, perhaps are. The time is approaching 10:30. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 10:33 is the time. What's your favourite Nadeem Zahawi story? Putting the heating bill for his horse's stables on parliamentary expenses, being sacked for breaking the ministerial code over his tax affairs. Actually, my favourite was when Boris Johnson was trying to make a comeback after departing Parliament in complete disgrace, having been found to, of course, lied to Parliament and lied about lying to Parliament. Or did that come later? It's so hard to keep up with the chronology, isn't it? I think after he was chucked out of Downing Street by his own party, but before he was found by a committee of his peers to have broken the code and brought Parliament into contempt, Nadeem Zahawi was leading the line on his comeback. This was after Liz Truss's disastrous departure from office, and Boris Johnson was keen to make a comeback. So at 9 p.m, I don't know if you're aware of this, at 9 p.m. on Sunday the 23rd of October, the Daily Telegraph published online a glowing endorsement of Boris Johnson with the headline, "Get ready for Boris 2.0, the man who will make the Tories and Britain great again." explaining how an imminent and triumphant return to Downing Street was just around the corner. Somewhat unfortunately for Nadhim Zahawi, Boris Johnson announced at more or less exactly the same time, at about 9:01 on Sunday, the 23rd of October, that he was pulling out of the leadership contest. So the Telegraph, and this never happens, they deleted the article entirely from the internet without doing anything that you would normally expect a reputable newspaper to do. And I know what you're thinking, James, you're talking about the Daily Telegraph. I know, but it's my dad's old paper, so I still harbour a sort of nostalgic yen for the days when it was a more obviously reputable organ. They didn't even put up an editor's note or an explanation as to why they'd taken this down. Extraordinary, really. That's probably my favourite Nadhim Zahawi story, although claiming the heating bill for his horse's stables on parliamentary expenses it's up there as well. None of this, of course, is in any way as bad as Keir Starmer buying a field so his late mother could run a donkey sanctuary. 10:35 is the time. Michael's in Leeds. What lessons are we going to learn from? What lessons do you want us to learn from this story, Michael?
Okay. Hi, James.
Hello, Michael.
Well, basically, I think I've got two lessons for us to learn. One is people in power ought to be able to take responsibility for stuff, especially if they can take all the big bonuses that they get paid for supposedly doing the job. So we know that Paula Vanells is not the only one. Did you
know she was a priest?
I found that out, that actually, Church of England priest, yes.
I only found out this morning. How have I missed that? I thought to myself.
She was actually in the shortlist to be Bishop of London. Apparently.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get into these circles, Michael? I'm quite well known these days. How did you get into the sort of shortlists for these incredible jobs? You end up on boards, or you end up with these. Just extraordinary, really. But anyway, we digress. I think you're being overly optimistic, aren't you? If you're expecting a
little bit.
Yes.
I mean, it started off with David Mills in 2002. Okay, and he was there till 2005. Then Alan Cook from 2006 to 2010. Then Paula. Then after Paula is like Nick Reed. Nick Reed's 2019, so we can't really blame him so much.
No.
But he produced a Christmas message, and in that he said, I hope we learn the lessons or whatever. We're going to change Horizon and that. But it's still a robust system.
Yes.
And that word robust to me is, we almost need to get Susie Dent to strike that out of the dictionary. It's been so...
she's very powerful, Susie, quite rightly. Queen Susie, as we call her on this programme. But I don't know that she's quite that powerful enough.
I tweeted her and asked her, and she just kept quiet. But so then the second lesson is, there's this lady called Julie Wolstenholme who actually, she could have probably have an ITV drama about her as well, because in 2003, this is while Alan Bates was getting his post office closed, she took on the post office. She's stalwart, basically.
This is in Nick Wallace's book as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yes.
This is how I got it, yeah. I tweet Nick Wallace all the time. It's really great. And basically, she's in this Blackpool post office in Thornton Cleveland. I have relatives that live around there. And apparently she took them on, and she was able to get a guy called Jason Coyne, who's like an IT guy, that helped Alan Bates in his court case in 2015, going on 2018 ruling. And this was 2003, and he basically did a report that just got them banged to rights on all the Horizon bugs, but they shut it down, you see, because she countersued them. They were prosecuting her for the discrepancies. She countersued on the fact that the Horizon wasn't fit for purpose and that it was wrongful dismissal. She won both of those. The judge was going to rule for her, so they settled. They gave her about 186.
We're drifting a little from because I'm going to slightly, and I do urge everybody to read that book by Nick Wallace. But the lesson, really, I'm going to slightly redraw your lesson. What you want is more and more people to realise how absent the taking of responsibility for these sort of scandals is. So ideally, we would love to see a social change whereby people with responsibility for Bloody Sunday, Hillsborough, Grenfell, the COVID inquiry, Windrush, the contaminated blood scandal, Abbot fan, apologies to my Welsh listeners for not picking up on that sooner, we would like to see, if you like, consequences and actions, but the first step, perhaps, is a system in which a change to the system which demands it, that you actually have much quicker. Do you know who I think of, actually? The only one I can ever think of, and I'm not going to remember her name. Yes, I can remember her name. It was Sharon Shoesmith, who I think Ed Balls threw under a bus after the tragic death of Baby P because the tabloids were baying for blood, so Ed Balls delivered some. But I can't think of many other examples where someone at the very top of an organisation has been immediately and summarily punished for
they don't get punished.
They don't get punished. And that's the lesson to take away, I think. Yeah. Sadly, Michael, I'll take your optimism and I'll drown it in a sea of my pessimism, because the lesson we learn is that they don't get punished. Up to and including, I would predict, with fairly high levels of confidence, Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson and the rest of them at the COVID inquiry. 10:40 is the time. And remember, when Nadeem Zahawi was punished over his breach of the ministerial code regarding his own tax affairs, he was kicking and screaming all the way to the door. That was not something that prime ministers wanted to do, or that Nadeem Zahawi was comfortable with them doing. It was thanks to the work of that tax lawyer, wasn't it, Dan Needle, I think, that the story saw the light of day. So again, not the great British media, or indeed the great British Parliament that did the heavy lifting there, but a private individual like Alan Bates with the Post Office. Maybe that's a positive lesson, is that private individuals with the headwind behind them and a particular set of skills can make enormous impacts upon democracy itself, public life. Nick's in New Malden. Nick, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. Hello there.
Hello.
Yeah, yes, I've been quite interested in this case for the last couple of years after listening to the BBC documentary about it. But I have a kind of longer memory, because I was a juror, I believe, in one of the cases of one of the trials.
Oh gosh!
In about 2006. I
don't think you're allowed to tell me much more than that, really, are you?
I can't. Well, obviously, I can't tell you what happened in the jury room. Although I have to say, it's a fascinating experience to be a juror.
I'm sure.
But I can talk about what was in the trial.
Yes.
And the one thing, as far as I recall, I mean, it's 18 years ago now, but the mechanics of it seem to be the payment of things like disability benefits to people, that there were kind of physical dockets where people would pay cash out to claimants, but the computer system seemed to suggest that there were more than one single payment going out to each person, and all I remember was this very kind of urbane but also very bullish prosecuting counsel just basically saying, "Well, do you know how this happened?" And she said, "No. Well, you've had plenty of time to think about it. It's because you stole the money, isn't it?" Uh-huh. And I thought that was actually quite a nasty way of doing it.
Well, I mean, that is pretty much the job of prosecuting counsel, isn't it? To be fair, I mean, that is the nature of our legal system. It is an adversarial legal system, and the person was on trial for stealing. So, although it offends our sensibilities, Nick, I don't know that we can criticise the prosecuting counsel for accusing the accused of what they were accused of.
Yes. On the other side, we had a defendant who. Basically, the defence counsel appeared not to have their heart in it, and he just seemed to ask lots of very bland questions. Yeah. And to all the kind of witnesses who were very often benefit claimants saying, "Well, this is what happened," and they said, "Well, do you think you've made a mistake?" And they said, "No," and then just went on and didn't really. Well, this is interesting.
This is anecdotal, of course, and it's only one case. But it almost as if the evidence, because no one really questioned that the software would be at fault. The evidence was so overwhelming that even the defence lawyers thought that their client was guilty.
Yeah, well, that was the feeling. Well, certainly the feeling I had while watching it.
That's fascinating.
And also, and I'm probably, because I work in this field myself in terms of investigation.
Yes,
I kind of was really quite amazed by the actually, the sloppiness of the work of the post office investigators.
Interesting.
I mean, the documents they put to the court actually had kind of addition errors and all sorts of formula errors in them themselves. And instead of, what I would do, what I think I would have done if I was representing that client would be say, well, how, just to say to the jury, well, how can you believe any of this if they can't even get their act together on this? But anyway, again,
I have to ask, Nick, did the jury find the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Well, we couldn't get a majority verdict. That's the thing. I mean,
I'm glad I didn't do that as a hook and tease and come back after the break for the answer. So it was a mistrial, was it? Or
well, I think we just had to say not guilty for most of the case, but all but one of them. And I
were lucky.
And I just feel very sickened, actually, that I've actually been part of that process.
Well, you shouldn't beat yourself up for it, but because what you've highlighted, actually, I think is and this isn't in defence of anybody, but once again, I remind you of the difference between explanation and excuse. Sometimes when you try to explain things, it can sound like you're trying to excuse them. But do we have a sort of white coat syndrome with computers? So you just think the computer can't be wrong. It's why that Little Britain sketch was so effective, isn't it? The computer says no. It spoke to something, actually, that we all recognised. It spoke to something universal, that skit. And it never really seems to have occurred to anybody that the computer could be... Because so human beings are fallible and sometimes dishonest, but computers are not. Computers are computers. They are infallible and they can't be honest or dishonest. It's like a calculator. You type 2 + 2 into a calculator, it will never say 7. And yet it did. And I think psychologically, the impossibility of contemplating that, even as you're wondering where all the money's gone. Why is the local sub-postmaster, who's apparently £500,000 in the black on dodgy deals through his own books, why is he not driving around in a Ferrari? Why has he gone on holiday to a caravan in Weston-super-Mare when he could have gone to Barbados? So those are all pertinent questions, but they all come after the psychological failure to contemplate the possibility that people were punching 5 + 5 into their calculators on their post office computer systems, and the computer was recording 27. And then when you come to balance the books, there's £17 missing. And it must therefore have been taken by the person typing in the numbers. It's 10:47. This is a bit awkward, to be honest. It's happened again. I don't know why. I know I can sometimes come across as a bit boastful, but I do think it's pertinent that we are the biggest show on LBC, and I never get what I ask for. I never ever get what I want, at risk of sounding like a Rolling Stones song. So I wanted some production, we call it in the trade, for my new feature, Smear Kia, which is the increasingly desperate attempts of client journalists and right-wing media to smear Keir Starmer for things that are not actually bad or negative. It began with the Mail on Sunday's attempts to smear Keir for buying a field in which his late mother kept disabled donkeys, kept distressed donkeys, I beg your pardon. And when his late mother's disability made mobility an issue for her, one of her great pleasures was to sit in the window of her home, he told me this story himself, and watch the donkeys. Watching wildlife, watching animals can bring great joy. And the Mail on Sunday thought this was absolutely disgusting, especially when he sold the field for more money than he'd paid for it originally. That was the first example of smear Keir in the UK media, but this was before they really started panicking. 13 front pages about a curry that he had in Durham, which was not in breach of any rules or regulations, laws or COVID requirements. And again, the Mail on that occasion dedicated 13 front pages to it at the same time that they were not only defending Boris Johnson's repeated lies and law-breaking, but also preparing to give him £500,000 a year to write a column about things like why he's not allowed to set fire to Christmas trees, despite the fact that it was his government that passed the laws that prohibit the burning of wet wood. So that was another smear Keir. Then you had, more recently, just before Christmas, the Daily Telegraph went in very hard on the revelation that when Keir Starmer was a lawyer, he had worked as a lawyer. Absolutely disgusting behaviour, that, honestly. Shocking. And yesterday, the Sun newspaper soiled itself quite spectacularly by revealing that Keir Starmer worked for free to abolish the death penalty in former UK colonies. For free. Down with that sort of thing. Absolutely down with that sort of thing. And then finally, the Ode to Joy, the revelation that he particularly enjoys Beethoven's Ode to Joy because it reminds him of the collapse of the Berlin Wall at a time in his life when he was just starting out, and he therefore associates it with what he wants the Labour Party to be, something dedicated to freedom and meaningful change. But it's also the anthem of the European Union. So the Smear Keir campaign attempted to malign him for that as well. I've got one today. I don't think it's not like chart topping, but I haven't got any production. I'm being denied production on this programme. They're all too busy providing Chris Moyles with more jingles than you could shake a stick at, or I don't know. Probably the newsagents have got the stab producers working overtime. I'm not allowed anything, apparently. We've asked. Eleanor has gone into bat for the programme, but we have come back with nothing. So I'm going to have to rely on you to do some production for the programme, despite the fact that it is, I think, currently the most popular talk show in the whole of commercial radio in the United Kingdom. I'm having to crowdsource production. And this is what we've got so far.
Smear Keir.
I mean, I'm very, very grateful. So it's a wonderful man who runs a cartoon account, the Trumpton cartoon account, which is absolutely wonderful, and I'm incredibly grateful. But I don't think it works without the actual cartoon, you see. That's the problem. I don't think it... I think you need the... And I tweeted the graphics yesterday, so I'll tweet them again now so that you can see them to full effect, but I'm not sure it works as a standalone item of audio. I'll let you decide. Here. So now it's time for...
Smear Keir.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's the thought that counts. So today's story is in the Daily Telegraph. It's Sir Keir Starmer has slipped up during a live television interview by accidentally saying that he has two sons instead of a boy and a girl. This is national news now for the Daily Telegraph. The Labour leader made the gaffe while paying tribute to his family, including his, quotes, fantastic, end quotes, wife Victoria, for their support. Speaking to Sky News, he said he had two relatively young children, a boy who's 15 and a boy who's 13, when he actually has a son and a daughter. I'm beginning to think that is actually a suitable candidate for the Smear Keir archives. That's disgusting. How dare he have a temporary slip of the tongue on live television about his own child? I mean, good grief, that man's clearly not fit to be Prime Minister. Absolutely shocking. Jokes about rohypnoling your wife? Fine. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. Accidentally or temporarily getting the boy-girl ratio in your own family mixed up, that's scandalous. National news. No doubt awards will follow. 10:55 is the time. Feel free to enter your own candidates for the Smear Keir stab, because I don't know that we can necessarily run with that one, which is not a criticism because it works beautifully as a graphic. I'm retweeting it now so that you can see it yourself. It's Trump_ton who did this work, and it was beautifully done. I'll tweet it as entrant 1, okay? And then I'll do a hashtag Smear Keir. You can tell we're live, can't you, on this programme? So entrant 1, Smear Keir, is in your inboxes now if you follow at Mr. James OB on Twitter. Paul's in Buntingford. Back to the key question, Paul, of what do you want society to learn from the Horizon scandal?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
First time I've ever called.
You sound a bit surprised. You didn't do it by accident. Did you?
I didn't. It was a very much a spur of the moment thing.
Excellent. Well, I take that as a compliment. Thank you.
There's a couple of things, really. You mentioned before that we often see computer systems as being infallible, whereas humans often are fallible.
Yes.
I think one of the lessons we need to learn is that they're not.
Yes.
Ultimately, computer systems of all various sizes and complexities are built by humans, and as we know, humans are fallible.
Of course.
And the computer systems are only ever as good as the people that build them.
So the calculator analogy is actually unhelpful, isn't it, really?
Exactly. I mean, the calculator is a very simple, tool that's been around for absolutely, for donkey's years. But the second thing I wanted to mention, I think it's probably the more important thing and the more sort of wide-reaching thing, is that the type of companies, and obviously we speak specifically about Fujitsu in the case of the post office scandal. These kind of large software companies often work on these large-scale projects. They're incentivized mostly by profit rather than serving, ultimate value to their customers. And this is, my background is I've been a software engineer for over 20 years, and I've worked for all kinds of different companies. I currently work for a large multinational finance company. So this is from a broad set of experience that I've had, and I'm sure if you spoke to anyone else in the industry, they'd probably tell you a similar story. They often, their sales tactics for selling these big systems into, both private and public sector companies are often led by sales departments rather than engineers and, actual sort of business process people. They're often incentivized to overpromise and underdeliver, give hugely unrealistic timeframes and capabilities to their potential customers, which often leads to the types of kind of botched implementations that you see all over the news, for the last sort of 20, 30 years, including, systems that have been sold into the NHS and, as we've just seen with Post Office. And I think that we really need to learn that one of the problems here is that a lot of the companies that are buying these systems, specifically Post Office, NHS, so on, are ill-equipped to make value judgments on whether they're getting the right thing that they need, and
really
whether they're getting actual value out of these systems.
You might only have been in that department for 10 minutes. You've got no history. You've got no frame of reference for determining what's good and what's bad. It's a flaw in all of government and public procurement, isn't it? But it's particularly pertinent. It's particularly pertinent in IT. I'm short of time. So I just want to run one thing by you, Paul. You may not know this, but it's the front page of one newspaper today. The architect of the faulty Horizon IT system, who gave evidence that was used to convict sub-postmasters, has demanded immunity from prosecution before agreeing to appear at the public inquiry. What do you make of that?
That's a difficult one. I mean, you'll never be able to point to a single person as the single sort of source of all the problems that have occurred from that system. They're many layered and usually the problems actually stem from management.
So do you think he maybe has a point? Do you think he maybe has a point? He doesn't want to incriminate himself, but he does want to give evidence.
I think he might have a point. Yeah, I think he might
interesting.
have a point.
I'm glad I had you here to ask. Apologies for that unscripted interruption. I set an alarm on my phone to remind me to say hello to someone who I met yesterday, but I thought it would just buzz and come up on my screen. I didn't realise it would go ding dang dong. So you can find out who it was. Actually, a very good story. Which I'll share with you after this. 4 minutes after 11. There's another one here actually that I don't know. I don't think they have tried to spin this into a smear. But when Starmer published his full tax details in 2023, it included some capital gains tax that he received after his sister sold a house that he helped her to buy. He's such a wrong 'un, isn't he? He's such a ratbag, that Keir Starmer, helping his sister to buy a house. The Daily Telegraph reports today that in a live television interview on Sky, he accidentally said he had 2 boys instead of a boy and a girl. Stuart reminds us that leaving your child in a pub, as David Cameron did, was an amusing anecdote. And Tracy also points out that at least Keir Starmer knows how many children he has, which is an oblique or not that oblique reference to the disgraced former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. I don't know that that's fair, Tracy. I think Boris Johnson knows how many children he's got. It's just the rest of us that don't. So just a mild and friendly correction. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. I will tell you a funny story. So I set an alarm for 11 o'clock and I thought, hey, go to the news on time and the alarm will go off and you'll be fine. And then, of course, I never go to the flipping news on time. So my apologies for that outbreak of unprofessionalism on the programme. I don't like the next story for a whole heap of reasons. But I do think, and some of the elements of it did actually pop up on yesterday's programme. The police have responded to new data showing, so I should warn you, some of this might be triggering. We're going to be talking about the fact that boys are now the biggest perpetrators of sexual abuse against other children, against children. And I appreciate that you may well find this triggering, so I just want to give you a quick heads up that is the kind of crime that we're going to be talking about. The biggest perpetrators of sexual abuse against other children are now children. Police data showed that there had been a quadrupling of sexual offences against children in the 10 years to 2022. And remember, these are the ones that involve victims coming forward. And God only knows how many there are where, for a variety of reasons, many of which are perfectly and utterly understandable, will not come forward. It's a report for the National Police Chiefs Council. They take offending by adults against children more serious usually, but remain alarmed by the growth of sexual offending by those aged 17 or under. Now, the reason they give, and I'm taking the reporting from the Guardian newspaper because they will always be more reliable and responsible in potentially provocative or inflammatory issues. The reason they give is the violent pornography that boys are watching on their phones. Boys are watching violent porn on their smartphones, then going on to attack young girls. I would add to that there are probably other influences than pornography, although that they're very adjacent to pornography. This Andrew Tate character clearly provides a sort of how-to guide to unpleasant misogyny, deeply, deeply unpleasant misogyny that a lot of young boys have been attracted or seduced by. So I would throw that into the mix as well. But this conversation will begin with the establishment of the fact that accessibility to smartphones in particular and the internet in general has created in the minds of many, 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 many young boys utterly warped notions of sex, right? And I want to know how you I want to know how you found out. Because we talk before we come on air about how we will turn a story into a phone-in. You know we do. It's important that you do that. And the more interesting our conversation is, then often the more interesting the question we ask for you. And we were talking about how do you fix it? How do you help a boy get back down from that horrible place where he has got utterly warped ideas about sex because he has been watching violent pornography or listening to misogynistic influencers on the internet. But it occurred to us actually that in order to help a boy get down from there, you have to know he's up there. And you probably don't. I used to tell a story, God, it feels like a different age, doesn't it? And I wonder how many people listening know which story has just popped into my head. But it was one of those moments where I felt things shift inside me about the world in which I lived. It was a moment of social change that I clocked in real time, in the wild, as it were, in real life. And I'll tell you exactly what it was, because it's actually quite relevant to this conversation. I was on a bus, and there were three boys sitting just behind me to my left. I still, even at 52 on Saturday, and I still like to sit on the front right-hand seat on the top deck of a double-decker bus because it feels like you're driving. So I can remember where I was sitting, and I can remember where they were sitting. They were sitting in the third row back on the left-hand side of the top deck of the bus. Two of them were, and one was sitting behind them. And it was quite a quiet bus, which was odd because it must have been a school chucking out time because they were all wearing uniform. And this is a while ago, so they were older than my daughters. So it's probably 10 years ago or more. But you probably know, someone listening will be able to remember exactly when I told the story, because it's something that was happening in your world on the moment that you heard it. But one of them started showing some fairly hardcore porn to the other two. I could tell because the sound was on. I mean, whoever leaves their sound on in circumstances where it might prove embarrassing, eh? So the sound was on, and it was clearly pornography. And I looked around. I did that thing, sort of trying to look stern and disapproving. And I will never forget the three faces of the three boys. One of them was the ringleader. He was using language that he had either learnt from the films or learnt from watching other adults watch these films. He was providing a sort of running commentary with words and phrases of approval, right? He was fully engaged. And then one of his mates was a mixture of shock and titillation. He couldn't quite believe what he was seeing, but he was engrossed. I wouldn't go so far as to say he was loving it, but he certainly wanted to watch more. You could just tell from their body language, from their facial expressions, from what they were doing, their relationship with the screen, their physical relationship with what was happening on the screen. And it was the third lad, who I remember because he was really quite disturbed. He was quite discomforted is a great word, actually. He was quite discomforted by what he was seeing, but he knew, I think, or he felt that he couldn't say so. He was the one whose eye I caught, actually. And I always think, or I often think, not as often as I used to, because of the years that have passed, but I often think of those three reactions to the same footage. One boy was lost already, but presumably could be brought back. I mean, lost to the idea that violent degrading of women pornography is normal. One was lost, one was teetering on the brink, and one was repelled. But would he stay repelled? I don't know. I simply don't know. I can't even speculate. But three boys, same age, same school, same blazer. One was utterly lost to it, entranced, let's say. One was entranced, one was engaged, and one was repelled. Now, how do you find out that your boy has ended up believing that violent, degrading pornography is representative of sex? And I hope this doesn't come as a major shock to any parents, but if your boy has reached or is close to puberty, he is almost certainly watching stuff. What stuff? I don't know. It varies, doesn't it, from case to case. But in the same way that we would find dirty magazines in a hedge, or our friend's dad's old Mayfairs, or whatever it was, the sexually arousing imagery for teenage boys is like pollen for a bee. It just is. I'm sorry. However wonderful you think your boy is, however confident you are that butter wouldn't melt in his mouth, depending on his sexuality, of course, he will be pursuing arousal via almost any means imaginable, you know. Back in my day, we'd even look at the underwear models in Kay's catalogues. So you know, that's just a given. I'm sorry if I can't imagine it's a shock to you, but I hope it isn't. So how do you find out? We may get on to what can you do about it, but how did you find out that your boy, your lovely boy, your beautiful little boy, had somehow ended up entranced by or engaged by violent pornography, and had therefore ended up raising the chances that he would end up behaving inappropriately at best or sexually abusing at worst another child? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. I talk about Harlan Coben quite a lot because that wonderful show is on still. Well, I'm still watching it. I've got 2 more episodes to go. But he has another book where his one of the protagonists employed software to keep a very, very close eye on what her son was doing on the computer. But that was about 10 years ago. It almost feels like a different age now. The technology moves so fast. The idea of being able to control it or keep an eye on it feels a little bit further, or a lot further out of reach than it did even a decade ago. But I'm not so much interested today in that side of things as in the offline manifestation of the problem. What made you realize that your boy had adopted some fairly grim attitudes to these issues specifically? because it's clearly not your fault. The temptation to blame parents for anything that children do is huge, especially if you do this kind of thing for a living. It's lazy, but it's effective. It's clearly not your fault. Whose fault would it be that the third boy in the story I just told has ended up exposed to violent pornography on the top deck of an E3 bus? Whose fault would it be? It's nobody's fault. It's his mate's fault. Is it mate's dad's fault? Maybe. Couldn't prove it. Who knows? Doesn't matter. But how do you find out? How do you register? How do you admit, actually, that your boy has gone to a place, and I'm speaking to mums and dads, your boy has gone to a place that you really don't want him to stay in, with regard to his attitudes to women and in general and sex in particular. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Okay, so boys are now the biggest perpetrators of sexual abuse against other children, and the fact that they are watching violent porn on their smartphones and being exposed to misogynistic, exploitative influencers on the internet are contributing factors, if not the only or the main factors behind these figures. How did you find out? That's all I want to know. And it won't be easy, but it's important that you share and then perhaps provide a little bit of help and a little bit of guidance for parents not quite as far down the slope of parenthood as you are. 0345 6060 973. It's 11:17. 20 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Horrible story, horrible business. Must be horrible to have it in your home. Boys are watching violent porn on their smartphones, then going on to attack young girls, police have said. As new data shows, children are now the biggest perpetrators of sexual abuse against other children. How do you know? How do you find out? How did you find out that your boy had gone to that place where warped perceptions of women in general and sex in particular have become commonplace? David's in Edinburgh. David, what would you like to say?
Hi James, thanks for having us on. I suppose it's twofold. One, as a father of two now grown up boys, and youngest boy being 18. I've also got a daughter who's a bit younger, but also being someone that's involved in youth work and has been involved in training youth workers and staff how to engage with the topic and also having conversations predominantly with young men. From a parental point of view, there's an assumption that they will look at porn. There's an assumption that you won't be able to control it because you can't control information. Like you said, they might be boy number 3, 2 or 1. You don't know often until it's too late. So it's about having a discussion about, what it is they're seeing. Do they understand that there's, some of it's staged. Some of there are precautions.
I mean, you're right, and this is important, and it's an important element of the next bit of the conversation. Yeah. Are you saying you just work on the presumption that they will be watching unpleasant stuff? You don't wait to discover the results of the unpleasant stuff. You have to start the conversation, because that's a nightmare for a parent to start a conversation at some point and say, without any proof whatsoever, I know that you're watching some filth on the internet and we need to talk about it.
I think there's a presumption. My sexual education was a copy of Razzle left on the bus on the way to school. Yes. And that's as much as it got. So there is an engagement with it. Young people are looking at it. So you can preempt that by giving them the skills, critical thinking skills, which I don't think we do at home. We dump everything on schools. And so actually, do you realise that some of this is staged? Do you realise that some of the women or the people involved might be trafficked? Do you realise that actually, there may not be consent in what you're watching? And those sort of things actually, I think, add a slightly different view to most young men. Not all of them. Some of them have views that are too compounded, sometimes topped up by family and adults who maybe share, tateisms, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, no, I hear you, but we're not. I mean, that's the tricky bit, really, isn't it? Is do you start the process with no basis for it except your fears, or do you wait for something to happen to which you respond or react?
I think just like life, you start the process.
How did you do it then?
Well, it's about treating people with respect. It's about making sure.
Listen. I'm going to sound. I'm just conscious of the time, but I just want to move. Sure. I want to move away from the obvious stuff that sounds a little bit platitudinal. Of course, so you sit down. Here's a 14-year-old boy. What do you say to him?
Basically, there's lots of information out there already.
No, I know, but I'm not asking about that. I'm asking what you did.
Okay, well, what I did, I said at the end of the day, you look at the women around you in your life and think about how they would feel if you're looking at things that demean women. Obviously,
it's not going to work.
In terms of not necessarily.
I mean, this is why I was interested more in the question of how you establish that your boy's got a problem rather than necessarily how you try to fix it. Because when it comes to the question of how you try to fix it, I think you are left with these inadequate sounding comments about demeaning and how some of the films are made. But I'm not more interested in the proof that there's a problem that needs to be solved from within your own family. Sorry, David, I don't want to sound ungrateful, but I've heard that conversation a million times, and it's not relevant until after we've got to the existence of the problem. 24 minutes after 11. How do you know? How did you find out that your boy was part of this phenomenon? That if watching violent porn on smartphones or any other device had given him a completely warped perception of women in general and sex in particular. And a quick word on Andrew Tate, who I sort of don't like talking about on the programme because I'm always wary of oxygen and publicity and that kind of thing. But I did get one message a moment ago from a chap called Dexter insisting that Andrew Tate is a positive influence and is good. And as a 36-year-old man, you don't know what you're talking about. And he's been back in touch to say, why don't you speak to all the girls who are encouraged to be promiscuous and who sell their pictures on OnlyFans and promote videos of themselves on it? So that there you go. That's the kind of person that thinks Andrew Tate's okay, the one who blames the women for their own sexual abuse and doesn't realise what he's doing because, of course, of the messages. And the point I'm making, although I don't think it was Dexter's intention when he got in touch, is that if a 36-year-old man can fall for that, then a 14-year-old boy hasn't got a prayer. Michelle's in Hackney. Michelle, what would you like to say?
I'm going to kind of disagree with the last call and say you've got to put it back in the system. I've got 2 children, one boy, one girl. I'm going to try and sort
your phone line out, Michelle. I don't know what happened now. I know it's not your fault, but we'll definitely come back to you. Sarah's in Glasgow. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Quite nervous speaking on the radio, so please bear with me.
It's only me. I know it's a tricky subject. I'm nervous as well. This is going to be great. Carry on.
I'm a mum of a 23-year-old and a 16-year-old. And 10 years ago, my 23, well, I was 13 at the time, came home from school and they'd been talking in a sex education class and the teacher had mentioned that there was free porn online.
Yeah.
So this was the first time that he'd ever been aware of it, But they'd all gone and looked during break.
Of course they had.
And he came home and we were chatting away and we were like, look, some of it's not nice, sweetheart. And he was like, yeah. He says, Mum, like, they're choking people. And we were like, yeah. So we kind of had to have the sit-down chat maybe a wee bit earlier than we wanted to.
I tell you what, though, Sarah, I mean, what a credit to your parenting that he could even open up that much. There'd be an awful lot of boys listening who couldn't imagine having that conversation with their mum.
Because some of his mates, didn't. Yeah, and then they kind of got quite, and they would be quite horrible to girls. And
yes.
Luckily, my son's quite friendly with girls and all that kind of thing. And he was just like, no, that's not right. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then over the years, they had a conversation in 6th, because we went to school and said, why are you showing my 13-year-old son online sites?
Yes.
And they said, well, part of there was we shouldn't have done it, but part of it was we need to educate these kids. But I think it kind of backfired in a way. But anyway.
Did it? Did it? Because, I mean, what about... Well, it has backfired because it has prompted some boys to go online, find some nasty stuff and not have a conversation with a responsible adult about it.
Aye.
But, you
in
know...
a way it was, because it was open.
Yeah,
we were able to have a chat.
Exactly.
And it was quite
tricky,
good.
Isn't it?
It is, because I've got a 16-year-old that luckily his big brother's been quite influential and said, look, mate, choking women doesn't happen. No. All this. But then some of my elders' mates grew up with, watching Andrew Tate, and it's like, my boys hate him, which is fantastic, but it is just the kind of ease in which they can just log on and look at these things, and it is some of them find it hysterical, but it's the ones that don't that really worry me.
Yes, of course. And
I'm glad I don't have daughters.
Well,
it's terrible. But
no, it doesn't sound terrible at all. But the way you tell it, it's almost as if your boy didn't need talking to. His sensibilities were in place, and he knew. It's like the lad on the bus that I described, the three of them. I don't know if you heard. One's entranced, one's engaged, sort of in a trepidatious way, and one is repelled.
Yeah,
and your boy was repelled.
I think the good thing was that he was able to turn around and say, "Is that right?" And his dad was like, "No, mate, it's definitely not. They don't bring a friend." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we were able to have that kind of funny chat. But some of his mates had gone the opposite.
Of course,
and
they're never going to talk to anyone about it, and they're going to be the ones that end up with some deeply unpleasant opinions that can lead to some deeply unpleasant behaviour.
But my 16-year-old is dealing with friends who think Andrew Tate's wonderful.
Still.
And he's like, this is a nonsense. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And it's a horrible time for kids because it gets videoed and it's there forever. And I just think at the moment, I would hate to have been at school where my boys are. And it's good that people are actually talking about it now and saying, like, the stuff that you see online is not real. And it's...
No, that is it. I mean, because it is and it isn't, isn't it? That's the point. It's real in one sense and not real in another, and that's quite a difficult thing to convey. It's quite a difficult thing to explain. And I mean, what's quite scary is the thought that a lot of the work that needs to be done long before it pops up on your mate's phone or you go and look at it on your laptop. You need to be in a place where almost your instincts, your honed instincts, your nurtured, your cultivated instincts have made you the boy who would be repelled by it rather than the other two. And that's not a criticism of anyone. It's just an acknowledgement of, as Sarah said, it's a horrible time to be young. 11:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines. 34 minutes after 11. I'm going to read this, probably without comment, because the story tells you everything that you need to know, except to say that it is a cautionary tale about where the unfettered access to violent pornography on the internet or any form, really, of exploitation can lead. Please keep this anonymous, is the first line. We are a middle-aged, middle-class, stereotypical family, teenage son and daughter. Our world was shattered when the police turned up at our door one morning and removed my then 17-year-old son's devices. He had viewed indecent images of children. He had been led down a terrifying internet rabbit hole from normal, in quotes, straightforward porn to darker and darker parts of the internet. We were rocked to our core. I know all mums love and think the best of our boys, but I cannot tell you how completely this is not him. He is kind, thoughtful. There was never any suggestion that he was harbouring a dangerous attitude towards sex or, God forbid, children. When it all became critically serious, he engaged fully with all the authorities, the police, social services, youth offending, etc., and he was actually relieved that this was being forcefully brought into the open and that he was made to stop. He was one of the lucky ones. Everyone agreed that he posed no danger and he received a caution. Had he been 18, so just months later, he would have been treated as an adult. He could have been taken to court and had his name released. I think he would have taken his life if that had happened. What came out from all the people I have dealt with is that this is an epidemic that we are not talking about. I know it's an extension of the theme under discussion, but this is where his watching pornography ended up. I should mention also that he has an autism diagnosis, which is relevant in terms of risk-taking and a lack of empathy. He knows he can never access any of that again, however, quotes, tame, end quotes. And I live in fear that one crossed line could end up with his life ruined. I think the line to take, well, there's lots of lines to take away from that, but the idea that the experts in the sector describing an epidemic that we are not talking about covers all of these angles, I think. 11:36 is the time. Michelle is in Hackney. Michelle, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
What your last caller wrote in and said to you, that's where I'm coming from. I think what has to happen is it has to be tackled at school level.
Yes.
When they're speaking about sexual education. That needs to be covered, as it always has been. But now we've moved on. It is. I've seen my son's phone. He's 15. the way the imagery comes across, it's animated. It's not real life, so it speaks to where their brains are developing.
How old is he?
15. It's violent, it's aggressive. I've seen it. He doesn't share it out. It comes into his phone, but it is just a common thing for his friends to do.
Right.
I think they do need to be sat there once they've had their first talk, which is standard sexual education. They need a second talk. They need it with the authorities and the teachers to say what is indecent and what happens when you share indecent images, or what happens when you receive them. I do think more people, it should be escalated to the police. I've seen and heard of many stories in school where images of children themselves are being shared as jokes amongst other children. The police are never called. So these children do not know that they're sharing child sexual images. They just becoming a part of
you're right.
everyday
No, you're right, and
life.
it's relevant. But I'm just going to steer you back to because we will have that conversation again, and we have had it before, and it is part of the total number of sexual offences. You're right. Young people need to know that even sending pictures of themselves can be a criminal offence if they are underage. Because you cannot consent to it if you're underage. It's the same sort of territory as statutory rape. But just let me stick, because I don't know quite how to say this, but I don't believe that your 15-year-old boy is only watching animated pornography.
No, he probably isn't.
Right.
This is what I've found on the network. Because I'm allowed full access to his phone. It's part of our agreement.
Sure, but he can delete stuff, can't he? He can delete his search history.
I would say yes, but that's not it's all there.
Right.
He has nothing. I don't give him anything to hide from because I'm allowed to see it. I'm not allowed to comment back on it, but I'm allowed to see at any time what is going on his phone. And so the history is all there. I do see it all. But I just can't help but think these kids need to know that there is like the last person wrote in and said, that there is a criminal side to these kind of things where if you start to receive certain things and you're not doing anything about it,
yes,
that the police can come to your door. I think if more parents knew that police will come to your door and they will take your children's devices, they've been told it. I can't believe you can put it on the parents because, as one of your other callers just said, some parents will tackle it, others will just
Teachers have got. It's a tough one, is it? Because Louise has been in touch while you were talking. It's interesting that your parent callers, are passing the role to the schools. Parents fund the phone; they should monitor it, which you are doing, and also have the conversations themselves. Parents need to parent. Schools need to educate to a point. But where does the school's responsibility lie? And Louise is a teacher in Berkshire.
The reason I think it has to go to school, it's like with any life lesson, you've all received the same lesson at the same time. So there is no excuse to say you were not told, you did not know. And that is the only time you're going to have all the children together is in a school setting. And they will all receive the same standard, basic information about it. And then what they go out there and do afterwards, they can't say, well, I didn't know, I wasn't told. You were told, you received this trait, this...
I mean, actually, I see your point more clearly now. The idea that you need to frighten them a bit with the consequences of stuff they don't realise is dangerous, actually.
They're not seeing the consequences. If they knew what happened to the boy who the woman just wrote in about her son... They'd think twice.
They would, although I think, but the problem we're discussing is not particularly accessing illegal material, although that is, as I stressed, pertinent. It's more watching legal but distorting, violent, exploitative material that may have been made illegally. It may involve trafficked women, it may involve coercion, but there's nothing in the imagery that would render the viewer culpable until it leads them to do something criminal. And that's a different proposition from the one you're describing, but it's not to detract from the importance of the one that you are describing. I don't know how you do it. Crikey, what's it? What would you do? What would you do if you were on that bus and in my seat and you turned around and it was your son that was the one who was all over it? What would you do? The one providing the running commentary and the comments. What would you do? So I've got a horrible feeling that some of that will be learned behaviour. So the last person on earth who's going to give their son a talking to about those kind of attitudes is the parent from whom he's learned them. I don't know. Mike's in Portsmouth. Mike, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Just want to give you kind of some background to my my situation with my son. So he's 13 years old, and because I work in the IT industry, I've got tracker on his phone, and I can check what he's looking at and things like that. And he was accessing porn, and I went to have a conversation with him, and I was just very, very honest. And, I was just saying, look, the first thing he asked was, have you ever watched porn, Dad? And I said, yes, I have. I'm not going to lie to him. I think it's important that we don't lie to our children, and we make it easy for them to talk to us.
Yes.
I said to him, look, you're 13 years old. It's a little bit too early for you to be doing this. We say that this is.
Is it though?
Well,
Your phone is a bit muffled, Mike. I don't know why. I don't know whether.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
It's a little better. Yes. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to pick over the detail. I don't want to split hairs.
I think, but I also think that he's exposed to things at school, in the playground, at lunchtime. He's recently
exactly
to school,
yes.
and these things are going to happen. And I will monitor his phone. I think parents should really think about being able to monitor phones better, so that they get it instantly onto their phone, what they're looking at, not asking them for the phones, and saying to him, look, these things it's a little bit too early for you to be looking at that. I don't believe in school education, obviously educating children at school, because, yes, we educate them on bullying, we educate them on everything, but it still goes on. It's not going to stop. We also have to think that some children will watch porn when they're older and not generate and move forward into violent behaviour, just like some children will drink and
that's very true.
Alcoholics. So things will happen. So we have to tackle it. Or I believe, that speaking to my child about it, not making it a taboo subject, and being open about it is the best way forward.
It's a fingers crossed territory, isn't it? Really, that's all we can ever be as parents.
But also we can monitor what they're like. What they're like around the peers. What are they talking about? What they're saying. Are they over sexualizing themselves? All the things like that. There's cues that you can look at. My son's got neurodiversity as well. He's got ADHD, so I have to be careful about his social interactions, and things like that. But we can, as parents, do a lot if we notice. Don't let children just be upstairs on the Xbox, on the phones. Have a think about what they're doing and how that impacts their learning and understanding of the world. Because it's difficult. Difficult for parents.
It is difficult. It's difficult enough for adults to navigate some of the complexities and the speed of change and technology. And I mean, as I say, we're obviously in fingers crossed territory. But do you sense that your lad was comforted by this conversation?
Absolutely. I think the fact that I didn't overreact. I didn't say, right, there's consequences, right, I'm banning your phone, right, your Xbox is being taken, all the things that don't really work. I believe that he will now be able to come to me, and if he thinks, actually, my parents have done things like that, it doesn't make it right for him to do it now, but it shows him about the world. It shows him that these things, he will be exposed to things like that, just like he will be exposed to drugs. He will be exposed to all these things, and we have to educate them and not be too strict in our responses, in my opinion. That's just my way of dealing with it.
I don't know, and you're getting ahead of it. I mean, we could have a conversation about whether it's worth saying it's a bit early. I think if they're drawn to it, it's time. I don't think it's too early or too late. I wonder whether the last caller, John, picked up on that question of timing, that they are different. They shouldn't all be having these conversations at the same time, and that's why parents are going to be at the front of the queue of people positioned to have that conversation. But whenever we do these, anything remotely related to sort of PHSE territory and children, I always think of the children who do not have parents like Mike. I mean, at the other end of the extreme, it's the parents who object to their children having any sex education whatsoever. Why would you not want your children to be taught about what is and what is not appropriate in the context of sexual activity? I know some people claim it's a religious position that they're coming from, but it could be an altogether more sinister position. So the children most in need of those sort of lessons could be the children whose parents are most adamant that they don't want them to have them. So the teacher-parent dichotomy is it's an incredibly nuanced one. It's going to almost be bespoke for every child. Who is the best person to have that? I could never talk to my parents about that sort of thing, someone might say. Whereas for another child, the idea of having that conversation with sir or miss or your class tutor, your teacher, your form leader, it would be absolutely terrifying. So you just don't know. But Mike got it right, I think, up to the point where we all have to acknowledge that the best you can ever do is hope that you've got it right. 10 to 12 is the time. I even more than usual, texts on this topic are remarkable. I think probably one of those subjects where you might find it a little easier to talk via text than on the phone, particularly with regard to things that have happened within your own family. This is interesting, picking up on that last theme. Pat in Buckinghamshire saying, this is a crucial phone-in. Thank you for addressing it. I just want to say in response to one caller that it is the responsibility of schools. It isn't. One caller saying that it's the responsibility of schools. It's not the responsibility of the schools to solve every world problem. Parents must take more responsibility. Schools can't do everything. So again, evidence of that nuance. No one's passing the buck, but equally, there are some children for whom the parents are doing nothing. So what do? Just hang them out to dry? Or recognise that the ideal world is a balance between parent and school, and yet for some children it's going to be all parent or all school, and for some children it's going to be neither, and they're the ones that are probably being poorest served. Here's a text. It says, anonymous, please, but it certainly contains a first line that caught my eye. My wife and I are very active in the BDSM scene. BDSM is, for those of you who don't know, bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, sadomasochism. And we have a son approaching puberty. This is a really, really interesting, even perhaps an important contribution. It's not common knowledge, but the biggest issue in the kink scene is consent. Yes, there are some bad actors, but on the whole, you will find fewer non-consensual acts within BDSM, the BDSM world, than you would in a sample of the vanilla population. And again, I don't know whether I need to translate some of this terminology, but I'm going to anyway. The vanilla population would basically describe to people whose sexual activity is not, quotes, kinky, end quotes, or doesn't involve bondage, discipline, dominance, sadomasochism, or indeed submission. As our son develops, this is where I think this is really helpful, as our son develops, we will ensure that the issue of consent is at the forefront of any contact he has with pornography. And we will have no problem, without going into our own personal details, we will have no problem instilling in him respect for those around him and the concept that consent is king. Open and honest is the key. That's really well put. I'm so close to saying your name. If you say anonymous, please. You've texted in before, so I've got your name on the screen. But anyway, no one would know if I just said that first name, who I was hearing from. But that notion of consent's easily taught, I would have thought. More easily taught than some of the other issues attached to this. And again, just a question that I did already raise about that notion. It was from Mike, wasn't it, in Portsmouth, about it being somehow too early to watch pornography. This is really unhelpful. They say they need to be told that it's wrong. There is no need for pornography. And the whole time anyone can access it, expectations of sex will be skewed against women in a bad way. I'm afraid that is like trying to put a genie back in a bottle. Or, and don't text me to remind me that King Canute was trying to prove the opposite to his courtiers. It would be like trying to stop the tide coming in. I respect your position, but it is ridiculous. Can I say that? Can I respect a position and consider it ridiculous at the same time? I just did. It's coming up to 5 to 12. Natasha Clark is back in the studio for the first time in quite a long time. It's a reminder of the hiatus, politically speaking, that we have been enjoying, and the fact that PMQs...
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed our little break.
It's back.
I'm glad to be back, though. Delighted.
Good. And
ready.
This is, the last four that you've covered, you described, I think, sequentially as being the best that Keir Starmer had ever done.
Yeah, he's not going to get better than that, is he? He was very, very good at the end of last year, wasn't he? Lots of zingers, lots of jokes, and generally his MPs on the backbenches seem to be enjoying themselves. It's not like things have got too much better for Rishi Sunak over the Christmas break.
Have they got worse?
Probably, yes. He's down 2 points in the latest opinion poll. I think down up to 22%, Labour around 46%. So he's got a long, long way to go. And, first PMQs of 2024, this is going to be an election year. We know that. We don't exactly know when it's coming. Rishi Sunak says probably in the latter half of this year.
Yeah.
But never rule out.
Would you not?
Early.
I mean,
No,
if you had
wouldn't,
to
no.
place a bet, you'd put it on November, would
Probably, yeah.
Right.
But I think that if, say we have a March budget and things are looking up, the polls start to look up, the economy starts to look up, there's a lot of ifs here, I'll admit. I would not rule him out going a little bit earlier, but I think it's less likely, especially because the economy is not doing very well.
I received quite a lengthy message while you were off from someone whose pedigree is impeccable and was working very close to the centre of operations in previous incarnations of successful Labour leaderships, i.e. electorally successful ones. And he thinks that a lot of the themes you were picking up on before Christmas, actually, the messaging has improved hugely in the last 10 months. The idea that he is dull but worthy is becoming a positive. The idea that a Prime Minister should use the levers of government to make the world better is actually cutting through to people. Public service, detail, intelligence, a sort of innate goodness, which has been absent from a lot of politics in recent years. So you don't even need to agree with his policies, but you can support the idea that what he's doing with a good heart because he believes in seeking to make the country better according to his values. I found that quite compelling.
That's interesting. And yes, we'll obviously hear from Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's Questions. His attack for Keir Starmer, which he revealed on Monday, was Keir Starmer will take us back to square one.
Yes.
Well, for a lot of people, square one's looking quite attractive right now, isn't it?
Well, in terms of patient satisfaction in the NHS, in 2010 it was the highest it's ever been, so we'd welcome that square one, I
exactly.
think.
So, but yes, there is that argument. There is, though, an argument, though, that Rishi Sunak obviously presented quite a bit of a different, contrasting Prime Ministership to Boris Johnson, and he will argue, well, I've got a lot of that. I've got a lot of public service. He is very much a details man, Rishi Sunak. He does read his briefs. He is always prepared for those things like liaison committees that Boris Johnson was perhaps not so prepared for. Equally, he could have earned a lot of money, Rishi Sunak, working in the private sector. His argument will be, well, I'm working in public service
but
because I believe in it.
£300 or £400 million in the bank. I mean, the idea that he's sacrificing even more wealth in return for public duty is going to be a little bit hard to sell to the British public.
But he will then argue, well, like I say, I could be doing something else, but I'm doing this because I believe in it. That's his argument.
He could certainly argue that, as opposed to simply trying to impress his father-in-law.
It's true. It
could be. That's one theory that I've heard. This is where I remind you that as soon as Keir Starmer gets to his feet in the House of Commons, we will cross live immediately to that exchange, 2 p.m. queues. So go on then. What's likely to come up today? Quite a tricky one, I'd have thought.
Well, Post Office obviously has been completely dominating this week, and rightly so.
What question? What would you do?
I think the question I would ask is, would you give a moratorium to Fujitsu taking on new government contracts, and should they be stripped of their existing ones? Something like that.
But what about why did you give £3.6 billion as Chancellor of the Exchequer post 2019 when Fujitsu's involvement £3.6 billion during Sunak's time as Chancellor and Prime Minister of solo and joint public sector contracts to Fujitsu after that 2009 December, I think, 2019.
Are you part
ruling.
of the leader of the systems briefing team? Because that's exactly what I would definitely be asking.
Right.
Definitely, that's a very good question. And I think Rishi Sunak cannot wriggle out of that because it's all under his watch. And he can't argue that, we didn't know what really was happening around the Horizon scheme.
No, well, exactly.
All of this
stuff. It is actually odd. But I mean, politics aside, or partisanship aside, what does a company have to be neck deep in order to not be at the front of the queue for £1 billion government contracts?
And I believe that they are still, the last time I checked, they are still running the Post Office IT system.
Yes.
How is it that Fujitsu are still running that system despite everything that's happened? Why have they not been stripped of that contract? That's quite another question that I would ask if I was Keir Starmer. Also, he may attempt, I think, to touch on Rwanda, because obviously that's now starting to bubble up again with these amendments, and he might go on the Tory civil war argument yet again. Labour, obviously, in contrast, a party that is much more united than the Conservatives at the moment. Will he decide to touch on that? Potentially.
What's happening with Rwanda? Is it today?
So
I forget which rebels are rebelling and which rebels are being looked after. But they're rebelling from different angles. Some of them think that this policy is not disgusting enough, and some people think that it's too disgusting.
Exactly. It's hard to keep up. But yes, Penny Mordaunt said yesterday that it will be coming back next week. So the rebels are starting to put down their amendments. We've had some from the right of the Conservative Party yesterday, and we'll be waiting to hear what Rishi Sunak might want to say about that, whether he will support any of these amendments. I think it's quite unlikely, because the other side will say, no way, we're not voting for that.
I have a long and glorious history, we all do actually, you and your predecessors, of when you state with certainty something that will come up at PMQs, it doesn't. But I
haven't been hugely right so far, have I?
No, but you haven't deployed certainty. You haven't broken the glass and pressed the certainty button. It will be stunning if he doesn't move upon this extraordinary wave of public interest and public outrage at the Horizon post office.
Yeah, I think he has to nod to what he is going to do, and all of the direction of travel has been that the government want to introduce a new law to overturn all the convictions in one go. And we are expecting an urgent question on this straight after PMQs from David Davis MP, who's going to be asking the minister in question which minister we will see, whether it will be Cami Badenoch or a junior minister who will come up and answer that on behalf of the government. But they will be setting out some of those details later on. We will wait to see exactly what that means. I think Rishi Sunak will want to nod to that and say, look, we are going to sort this out. This is how.
We shall we should watch with interest, and I mean also, we might hear about this bill to exonerate Victor, as you mentioned at the outset of the scandal. But who knows? They're going to have to do something, aren't they? Because the public response, media coverage has reached the clamorous.
It has,
level.
And the government this morning have said that they want to pay all those payments out by August. They've set themselves a new deadline to do it. If they are going to do that so quickly, then this has really got to be quick. At the moment, it's taking so long to overturn every single individual conviction that these post office leaders have got over the years. There's so many of them. I think they've only done 90 something so far. There's hundreds of them to go.
And I again, here we go. Sir Keir Starmer on his feet now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard what the Prime Minister just said about the post office scandal. It is a huge injustice. People lost their lives, their liberty and their livelihood, and they've been waiting far too long for the truth, for justice and for compensation. So I'm glad the Prime Minister is putting forward a proposal. We will look at the details, and I think it's the job of all of us to make sure that it delivers the justice that is so needed. Mr. Speaker, back in 2022, when Boris Johnson claimed he would send asylum seekers to Rwanda, one ambitious Tory MP had reservations. He agreed with Labour that it wouldn't work. It was a waste of money. It was the latest in a long line of gimmicks. Does the Prime Minister know what happened to that MP?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what that honourable gentleman refers to is a document that he hasn't seen, I haven't seen, and has been reported second-hand in a bunch of media newspapers. But what I can tell him is, I am absolutely clear that you do need to stop the boats, and that's what this government and that MP is going to deliver.
I notice he didn't deny it, Mr. Speaker. I'm not surprised. £400 million of taxpayer money down the drain. No one sent to Rwanda. Small boats still coming. It's hardly a surprise. He wanted to scrap the scheme when he was trying to sneak in as Tory leader. But he's been caught red-handed opposing the very thing that he's now made his flagship policy. Which member should we listen to? The one before us today, or the one who used to believe in something?
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've always been crystal clear. You do need to have an effective deterrence to finally solve this problem. In fact, the National Crime Agency agree that you need, in their words, an effective removals and deterrence agreement. And that's why, after becoming Prime Minister, I negotiated a new deal with Albania, thanks to which we have seen a 93% drop in illegal arrivals from Albania. That's how Australia stopped the boats. That's why Italy, Germany and Austria are all looking at similar schemes. He's the only one who's opposed to a proper deterrent. Not because it doesn't work, because he doesn't actually believe in controlling migration, Mr. Speaker. Every single time he picks the people smugglers over the British people.
Mr. Speaker, we should smash the gangs, process the claims, and end hotel use. That's our plan. And unlike the Prime Minister, I believe in it. But,
I'm going to hear the questions. I don't want interruptions, please. It's very important. It's a very important topic, and I take it seriously. I hope members also wish to start taking it seriously. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, last year he started the year saying he was Mr. Steady. Then at his conference he was Mr. Change. Now he's flipped back to Mr. More of the same. Doesn't matter how many relaunches, flip-flops he does, he'll always be Mr. Nobody. And here's the tragedy of his leadership. He spends the whole time trying to convince people not to believe their own eyes, pretending that debt is falling, that the economy is going gangbusters, the NHS is in great shape. When he finally finds something he was right about, the Rwanda gimmick, he can't even take credit for it. When's he going to stop pretending that up is down, that black is white, admit that whether it's the economy, immigration, the NHS, he has failed?
Mr. Speaker, well, let's just go through his checklist. He talks about the backlog, 112,000 decisions made last year, a higher number than in any year in the past 2 decades, Mr. Speaker. He talked about hotels. Well, the first 50 are being closed and there are more to come, Mr. Speaker. He talks about the numbers. Well, they were down by over a third last year, Mr. Speaker, the first time that's happened. And then he talked, Mr. Speaker, he talked about smashing the gangs. Well, if he does care about smashing the gangs, why doesn't he own up to the fact that when it came to the Nationality and Borders Act, he blocked, delayed and voted against the powers in that act, which have allowed us to now arrest hundreds and hundreds of people connected with that illegal trade who have been sentenced to hundreds of years in prison. He opposed that because he chooses the criminal gangs over the British people every time.
I don't think we are. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, we can all see what's happened here. Just like he knows that debt isn't falling and taxes are going up, he knows the Rwanda gimmick won't work. But he can't be honest about it because he's too scared of his own MPs. Doesn't he wish he'd stuck to his guns rather than to allow himself to be taken hostage by his own party?
Mr. Speaker, we're debating this because we have taken a stand and we're delivering the toughest migration plan ever to end the legal challenges and actually get flights off the ground. And let's be clear about this. He doesn't have a single practical idea about how to stop the boats. But that's because he doesn't actually care about controlling migration. This is a person who described all immigration law as racist, Mr. Speaker. He thinks limits on economic migration are, in his words, economic vandalism. It didn't even feature once in his 5 missions, and he didn't mention it once in his conference speech. The truth is, he's pro-free movement, he's anti-border control, and he can never be trusted to stop the boats.
I think we should smash the gangs. And I spent 5 years of my life doing exactly. This is the party that's lost control of the borders. And whilst he's tending to the Tory party, the country is left without government. Yes. A collapse in dentistry, leaving people literally pulling out their own teeth. Flood defences completely exposed. Hundreds of thousands of children still out of school. His government appears blissfully uninterested in what's going on outside the walls of Westminster. Does he realise how ludicrous it looks when he spends his time boasting whilst Britain is breaking?
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad he brought up our schools, because there's nothing more important than ensuring our children get a world-class education. And that's why I'm pleased that, in spite of Labour opposing every reform that we made, our children are now the best readers in the Western world, Mr. Speaker. But he's right that attendance is important, and that's why we're investing millions of pounds more to provide support for absent pupils. We launched a national campaign, and just this week, we've doubled the number of attendance hubs to support over 1,000 at the most vulnerable schools. But I am surprised to hear him raise that topic, because from longer lockdowns or voting against our minimum service laws, his priority has always been keeping our children out of school, Mr. Speaker. It's always the same with him. There's no plan. It's just peddling one thing to his union friends and another thing to the British people.
New year, new nonsense. Every week he stands here and tells the country they should be thanking him, not questioning him. Point out that the view on the ground is very different to that from his private jet, and he says you're talking the country down. He just doesn't get it. He doesn't get what a cost of living crisis feels like. He doesn't know any schools where kids no longer turn up. And he doesn't understand what it's like to wait for a hospital appointment. Doesn't the country deserve so much better than a Prime Minister who simply doesn't get Britain?
Mr. Speaker, well, from the last week we had, yet another half-hour speech from the Honourable Gentleman, and what a surprise, yet again, it didn't contain a single new idea. We've had 4 years of him as Labour leader, and it's still all slogan, no plan, Mr. Speaker. Now, just this weekend, Mr. Speaker, we're delivering on our plan to cut people's taxes, Mr. Speaker. He doesn't have a plan. We've got a plan to stop the boats. He doesn't have a plan. And we've got a plan to get people off welfare and into work. He doesn't have a single idea. It's crystal clear, Mr. Speaker. Stick with us to deliver the long-term change that the country needs. Don't go back to square one with him.
Let him ask the question before you shout for more. Chris Clarkson.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just know it's going to be fantastic. And a happy new year to you anyway. It's almost spring when a young man's fancy turns to tax. In Scotland, the Nationalists have decided to increase taxes on hard-working people. Yep. And in Wales, businesses are being clobbered by a 5% increase on rates. Does my right honourable friend agree with me? There's only one party in this chamber that can be trusted to cut taxes for hard-working people.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. We are now just this weekend, Mr. Speaker, for an average person in work, cutting their taxes by £450, Mr. Speaker. In Wales, where Labour are in charge, they're raising them, with businesses there now seeing double the rate of business rates this year, Mr. Speaker. And it's the same in Scotland under the SNP, the new high-tax capital of the United Kingdom because of the SNP's tax hiking decisions. So, Mr. Speaker, while we've got a plan and cutting your taxes, it's Labour and the SNP that are going to raise them.
The SNP, Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, a horizon system introduced by Tony Blair, the former Labour Party leader and of course now a Knight's Garter, a horizon system defended by the current leader of the Liberal Democrats, himself a Knight bachelor, a horizon system scandal overseen by a former Conservative Prime Minister who now hides in the House of Lords as a baron. The reality is that sub-postmasters never stood a chance against the Westminster establishment, did they?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, this is actually one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in our country's history. And all our thoughts are with those who worked so hard for their communities and have seen their lives and reputations destroyed. And since this scandal, as the Honourable Gentleman pointed out, has actually unfolded over decades, and with multiple people clearly at fault. But since 2019 in the High Court case, this government established a statutory inquiry led by Sir Wyn Williams to uncover what went wrong, established an independent advisory board, and has established 3 different compensation schemes, paying out £150 million to over 2,500 people, with now almost 2/3 having received final compensation. But we must go further and faster, Mr. Speaker, which is why we have made new announcements today.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think the Prime Minister quite gets it. This isn't just a plague on all their houses. This is a plague on this House itself, because injustice goes far beyond just the sub-postmasters. Just ask the Waspy women, or the victims of the Equitable Life scandal, or the victims of the infected blood scandal, or the victims' families from Grenfell or Hillsborough. The reality is that when the public come knocking on the doors of this here chamber seeking justice, the government only ever answers when they have no options left. Now, the Leader of the Opposition said last week that the public are right to be angry at Westminster, and they are angry at Westminster. They're angry at Westminster because they know that this place never really changes. Does it, Prime Minister?
No, Mr. Speaker. This is... and actually, I am sad that the Honourable Gentleman is trying to politicise something that has happened over multiple decades, with multiple people at fault. But the key thing is, after the 2019 High Court case, the government did act to establish an independent inquiry, independent compensation schemes, and as I said, has paid out compensation to 2,500 people. But rather than trying to politicise it, what we should be doing is focusing on the people affected and making sure that they get the answers, justice and compensation that they deserve, and that is what we are delivering.
I made a promise to a granddad in my constituency.
I think we will withdraw at that point. I did have a contender for Idiot's Corner, actually, which is a bit rare for this time of year, isn't it? But I've managed to lose it. I shall try and find it. Not for this time of year, I mean for this time of the show. Ben in Stafford has been enjoying elements of the programme. He says, I've finally been able to tick off the word kinky on my James O'Brien bingo sheet. I'm not sure it is a word that I've ever said on the radio before, but it was the only word that would work in the context of that conversation. And here, I found it. Peter in Perth. Or perhaps his name is Peter Perth. He's a living, walking tongue twister. You are today's first and possibly only entrant into Idiot's Corner. James O'Brien, pray tell, are there any more reliable indicators of a pompous prat than the phrase pray tell? I should choose my word carefully there. I nearly swore. Pray tell why you only start covering PM's questions when Keir Starmer starts speaking and ignore Rishi Sunak. It's obvious where your political allegiance lies. Shall I let the political editor of LBC explain why we only start PMQs with the PMQs, or shall I?
Would you like me to?
Well, I mean, what's it called again?
Would they basically just stand up and he just says, I've been talking and having meetings with other colleagues this week, and it's just a waste of our time as to bring that to the listeners. We'd rather hear your analysis instead. Are you suggesting your analysis instead? Are you suggesting that Prime Minister's questions begin with a question to the Prime Minister? It's a poor question to the Prime Minister, isn't it? But we did miss Lee Anderson asking if Ed Davey would resign. So maybe we should cut
You must have imagined that, because Rishi Sunak's just said it made him very, very sad that Stephen Flynn tried to politicise this tragedy and scandal. So we'll check the tape on that, but there's no way 30p Lee would have been trying to politicise this scandal.
I think that sounds unlikely, doesn't
20 minutes before Rishi Sunak told off the leader of the SNP for trying to politicise the same scandal. 21 minutes after 12, and, well, it happened again, didn't it? He didn't ask a question about the post office scandal, did he? He mentioned it, but
Keir Starmer mentioned it, but didn't press a specific question.
I'm never going to make another prediction again.
No.
So because he didn't. Well, let's just establish for the tape, because I'd hate to accuse colleagues of misremembering and mishearing things. You claimed that shortly before Rishi Sunak had attacked Stephen Flynn for trying to politicise the post office scandal, you claimed that Lee Anderson had been politicising it with.
It's very upsetting, isn't it?
I'm sure that not Lee.
Now then, the Horizon post office scandal saw hundreds of innocent people sent to prison. People like a former constituent of mine who went to jail for 3 years. Now, during this scandal, the leader of the Liberal Democrats was the minister in charge of the post office. In charge of the post office. This is the same Liberal Democrat leader who in the past has called for the resignation of over 30 prominent people in this country who have made mistakes in their job. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that the leader of the Lib Dem should take his own advice and start by clearing his desk, clear his diary and clear off?
Oh dear. And what was it, 20 minutes later, that the Prime Minister expressed his deep sadness at the notion of another politician trying to politicise this scandal. Natasha, do you think that 30p Lee knows what party the Prime Minister of the period he's referring to there, when Ed Davey was the Minister for Post Offices, do you think 30p Lee knows what party the actual Prime Minister belonged to?
Well, obviously we know that Lee Anderson did have some trouble with parties at one point. He was a member of the Labour Party at one point. We will all
very
remember.
Recently, during this period, actually.
Yes, probably, yes. So maybe he did not know that. But yes, Stephen Flynn, the SNP Westminster leader, trying to paint his party as the only ones that were not implicated in this scandal, because it has been going on for so long.
It's probably true, actually.
It is probably true, but, not for anything they actually did, let's be honest.
No.
It was purely for the fact that they didn't exist in Westminster.
It's an achievement of absence.
Exactly, they've never been in government, so therefore they cannot be blamed for all the stuff that goes wrong. It's not quite what I would argue. But yes, the Lib Dems, Labour and the Conservatives rightly getting bashed all about their record on this. The Westminster establishment, this place never really changes, does it? Oh, it's a very bright and cheery comment from Stephen Flynn there, wasn't it?
So we need to work something out. We need to work out why Keir Starmer chooses to go after Rwanda again, when you might think that Rishi Sunak would welcome it as an opportunity to burnish one of his pledges, isn't it? One of his 4 unachieved pledges, the 5th being inflation, which everyone knew was going to come down anyway. But, we'll allow him that. Why is Starmer doing this? Why does he keep coming back to it? I think for him, how I read it is that it gives him the opportunity to attack the Conservatives for being divided. That's I think, what it looks like to me. They've obviously got so many different factions in the Conservative Party. There's 5 of them just on the right wing of the Conservative Party arguing about which amendments they're going to put down. This is the 5 families. The 5 families. One of which is led by Mark Gammon-Cheney. Indeed. So all of those, that I think for Keir Starmer is a powerful argument to make. You can't hold your own party together. You're just fighting. My party's united. We will come in and be the bit more the grown-ups in the room. And that's what I think he's trying to make. And obviously, I don't think he was as strong as he was as some of the other Prime Minister's Christians going in on migration, perhaps because Rwanda hasn't quite surfaced to the top of the news agenda yet, and it will next week. And I'm sure next week we will be absolutely in the thick of Rwanda rows within the Conservative Party and government about whether they will accept any of these amendments, what changes will they make, what won't they make. So it probably wasn't as strong as it could have been, and it has been from Keir Starmer in recent weeks. But it does put the light onto Rishi Sunak to talk about his plan. How is he going to solve it? And like you say, it is a promise he's made to the electorate. Yeah, and it's got that. I mean, he's right actually on the unity thing. I mean, whether or not everyone on the Labour benches is happy with Labour's position on these issues is moot, because no one's publicly attacking it. Doesn't matter because no one's talking about it. And yet, Sunak's under attack from every wing of the party. Is there also? I'm intrigued by this, more intrigued than usual actually. Is there a sense that there is a millstone round Rishi Sunak's neck? That reference to what his opinion was originally when Johnson first mooted. Was it Johnson who first mooted the idea? It's so hard to remember. It was Boris Johnson and Priti Patel. And, Rishi Sunak, obviously as Chancellor, had to sign off the money for this scheme. Yes. We've had lots of reports in the press this week about the fact that he considered scrapping it, reportedly last year when he was running to be Tory leader. He thought about it and decided not to, that he actually tried to scale back the ambition of the Rwanda scheme. Again, reports that have been sort of slapped down by Downing Street, but not fully, which I presume means there is some truth. They know there's something somewhere that could come back to bite them on the bum. Exactly. And I think it really goes to show that Rishi Sunak and so many prime ministers, they are so affected by issues that are very far out of their control. If you look at all the things that Rishi Sunak is having to deal with, the post office scandal, years in the making, migration issues, Rwanda, that was a plan that Boris Johnson, Priti Patel came up with, not him. Even in terms of topical issues, Gaza and Ukraine, again, not something that he has any control over. Prime Ministers so much these days are so driven by events, and they have to respond to them. Well, also, evidence again, notwithstanding what you said about him being good at details, he can't choose between politics or populism, and he's not very good at either. So Johnson goes all in on populism, which is how you end up with something like the Rwanda thing. But by the time Sunak is in post, the Rwanda thing is so well bedded in that he can't follow his instincts, which are probably more pragmatic stroke political, which would be to get rid of it because it's stupid and almost certainly unworkable. But the populism has bitten by then, and he's got people on his own party who won't let him get rid of it because they think they're going to be, well, Suella Braverman's dreams are going to come true and planes are going to be taking off on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. So I find him, this is the closest I ever come to mustering up sympathy for Rishi Sunak, and it's not sympathy by any stretch of the imagination. He can't be a populist because it flies in the face of all of his instincts and attributes and pasts. But I think what he's been taken by surprise by is the fact that he's not very good at politics either, partly for the reasons you explain, in that they're not spreadsheets. These are not things where you tweak that number there and that number there falls out the bottom. These are big, ugly, amorphous, unfolding scenarios and situations which you simply cannot control. So if he is a bit of a control freak, which has been claimed in the past, this is the worst imaginable sort of political territory for him to find himself on. And I think Starmer goes after the Rwanda thing because he senses Sunak actually, deep down in his heart of hearts, he really hates it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And going back to what we were saying at the beginning about Sir Keir Starmer wanting to be seen as that, guy, public service, a detailed man, a good man, a principled man, Rishi Sunak can't go back to that. He is a details man as well. He wants to be shown to doing something that works. But he's pushing something which he is not sure and the government is not sure will ever work, which is something that's very much against, I think, Rishi Sunak's character. And he's trying to do that to appeal to his own party and to appeal to what he thinks the country wants to see from him. But yes, he is somebody that thinks if you work hard in life, you do the right thing, you pick the right decisions, you stick by them, you have principles, you should be able to get on. But the polls for the Conservative Party show very, very much that's not the case right now. And nobody is buying into this vision from Rishi Sunak. He's trying to walk this tightrope between doing the right thing but also appealing to the party and country, and he can't do either.
This is the mad bit, because I'm thinking this before Christmas, and Starmer picked up on it today, and I think we'll see more of this in the coming weeks, is the fundamental absurdity of Rishi Sunak constantly praising himself for doing a brilliant job. Every speech he gives, he's claiming, it's almost in sort of, was it Wilson and Macmillan who said you've never had it so good? We're almost in that sort of territory. So everyone's looking at their pay packet or their electricity bill or their mortgage payments or their rent, and Rishi Sunak's popping up on the telly all the time saying, I'm doing a fantastic job and we're going to continue being brilliant. And Starmer, I think, for the first time, just began to tug at that thread today. And if he tugs a little harder, that's going to unravel fairly quickly.
Yeah, and I think, it goes back to what he said on Monday. Obviously, they're road testing some things for the election, aren't they? They're looking at what phrases might work. And the best they can come up with at the moment is the country is pointing in the right direction.
Yeah, that's a relief. I mean, that's surely...
Is it? Well, firstly, many people will say, is it? And again, going back to square one with Keir Starmer, that's another attack. And I think that doesn't... I don't know if that's going to work. People are going to go, well, actually, what square are we on?
Yeah.
We're at square 1,
37.
10, 20...
37.
37. Okay, yeah. Square 37's not looking brilliant,
It's not, is it? No. But we don't want to go back to square one. Thank you, Natasha. Great stuff. We shall. I have to keep up. It's hard. It's coming back next week, is it?
It's coming back
not another
Tuesday
holiday.
and Wednesday, and then we'll have PMQ, so we'll be talking about Rwanda, I'm sure, exactly this point in a week's time.
It is 12:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines. 12:34 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It took me a while to work this joke out, David, but... that's a compliment, I think. Is it? I don't know. I'll let you decide. On the subject of the smear-Keir process, have we had any more entrants yet for the stab? Have we had any more entrants yet for the stab on the smear-Keir? No. It's just humiliating, frankly. It's Anyway, on the subject of the smear-Keir process, you might be amused by the fact that the Daily Mail were concerned by Keir Starmer owning a donkey when it's possible to witness him doing this every Wednesday at PMQs. You have to think about it for a minute, don't you? And then it's not Yes Minister style satire, but I like it, David. I like it a lot. Henry Riley is here with an interesting story. You've been digging.
Yeah, no jokes. James, there have been suggestions and rumours bubbling away for some time that the future of the Reclaim Party may be in doubt. Now, that's because the private company that's behind the political project, which is called the Reclaim Party Limited, has failed to submit its accounts by the deadline.
Hang on, which one is the Reclaim Party? Is that the one that's run by the bloke from Lewis who wasn't Lewis, or is it the one that's run by the bloke that everybody wishes was Nigel Farage?
So it's the bloke from Lewis.
Who wasn't Lewis.
This is Lawrence Fox.
Right.
More on him in a moment.
Can't call him a moron.
No. So no, it's in more on him.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Yes, he's a very good musician, I gather.
He has sung, hasn't he, on TV a few times. But a few months ago was the deadline, the 31st of August, for those accounts to be submitted. They are now very much overdue. Now, the Reclaim Party Limited lists Lawrence Fox as one of its directors. It failed to file its accounts by the registered deadline, meaning that the last accounts actually published by the Reclaim Party Limited only cover the period until the 30th of November 2021. So there's a bit of a black hole between then and now. And I've been speaking with a leading tax lawyer, James, who's weighed in, who has called the party inept. Now, the Reclaim Party, to give you a bit of background, formed by the actor Lawrence Fox alongside the businessman Jeremy Hoskin back in October 2020. It did previously have a name as the Brexit Express, but then they changed the name to the Reclaim Party when Lawrence Fox was involved. It doesn't currently have any elected officials at any level of government. It did have Andrew Bridgen on its books at one point, but he left some months later, citing a difference in direction with the party. But I mentioned that leading lawyer, James, Dan Needle, who's the founder of Tax Policy Associates, and he told me that actually the accounting error, if they were to file their accounts, it would only take 15 minutes.
What concerns me is political parties not following the law, not following the basic requirement that they file accounts. And for this company, those accounts would probably take an account in about 15 minutes to draw up. I doubt they're hiding anything. I expect they're just inept, but really they should get onto it.
Mr. Needle told me what the potential consequences could be for Reclaim.
Every company has a legal requirement to file accounts. In theory, if you don't file accounts, you can be fined. Sometimes it can even be an offence. Companies House is strangely chill about this, and most of the time, kind of nothing happens. And if you don't file, and you still don't file, and you still don't file, Companies House will, or their computers, will automatically strike the company off like a death penalty for a company. And that's what started to happen here.
So this is very serious for the Reclaim Party Limited. So Companies House have started that process of writing the company off. It's been paused, though, James, because there was an objection received by the registrar back on the 12th of December. That only means it's temporarily suspended for a few months, and then that process of writing them off will continue unless, of course, those accounts are filed. But if you look at Lawrence Fox's X or Twitter, it doesn't look like he thinks the party's going anywhere. He has said that he's very serious about standing for Mayor of London again.
It did very well last time.
He got 1.9% and came sixth when he
more
stood.
More than 1.8%.
But of course, some way off the 5% deposit. So he's a few percent off.
Okay, but Jeremy Hoskin can afford that, I believe.
Well, I mean, certainly by the accounts, there's a suggestion that it probably could be filled in some way, that money. Many candidates do lose their deposits, but it didn't go swimmingly well in 2021 for him. I mentioned about the other politicians. So Andrew Bridgen no longer involved. He cited the difference in the direction of the party. He's the MP for North West Leicestershire. They did also have a councillor, James, you'll remember, in Market Drayton on the town council. This was the former Conservative councillor, Anthony Allen. He has actually resigned from the party as well. He's resigned so they don't have a councillor or an MP.
What happened to the MP again?
So Andrew Bridgen left the party. There are various rumours as to why that...
What's your favourite?
Why that may be. Well, there was one reported by a political blog that it was to do with a Christmas tree in a company car.
Tell me more.
Well, I haven't had that confirmed, James, just to make absolutely clear, but it was reported by the website Guido Fawkes that there was...
You can't really trust them, can you?
You can't, well...
Because they were describing my Mystery Hour board game as being unpopular or unsuccessful over the Christmas period. Someone showed me this yesterday. It's got a 4.6 approval rating on Amazon.
That's outrageous.
So they just found a couple of made-up reviews from people who've never played it but don't like me and reported it as if it was a news story. So I'm going to gallop to the defence of whatever it is you're about to tell me about company cars and Christmas trees. And say you can't trust that lot as far as you can throw them. Well, which admittedly, having seen the fellow who runs it wouldn't be very far.
What they reported, James, and as you say, hasn't been stood up, but that there's a company car for the Reclaim Party, and Andrew Bridgen had borrowed it to do some work in his constituency, presumably to visit constituents and be involved in engagements. Lawrence Fox, who's in London, not Leicestershire, needed that car back because of a Christmas tree. He wanted to transport a Christmas tree from where he bought it back to either his office or his home. It's unclear where. Andrew Bridgen refused to give the company car back. And therefore that sort of sparked this feud that happened.
The lad from Lewes who wasn't Lewes needed the car to get a Christmas tree, a party Christmas tree.
Well, that's what we're led to believe, a Christmas tree for the Reclaim Party, hence why he needed the Reclaim car to transport it.
Okay.
But I digress, James.
Heavy stuff. I mean, it's Frost Nixon.
I know. This is where I'm going to make my name. But so no councillors, no MPs. But lastly, from Dan Needle,
income tax, no VAT. That's a song. That's not an allegation.
But Dan Needle, lastly, James, did tell me some of the confusion was because of the different organisations that are behind the Reclaim Party. There are various companies that are involved. You've got the Bad Law Project, you've got the Reclaim Party Limited, who are involved in this. Now, Dan Needle told me that actually, if this is as it seems and the party doesn't file its accounts, then Reclaim will lose their whole party membership list.
Exactly what each of them do ain't clear, but it looks from the privacy notice on their website that it's the Reclaim Party Limited that owns the membership list. So if the Reclaim Party Limited was executed by Companies House, then they've lost their membership list, which wouldn't be a good thing for a political party.
Lastly, James, there was a suggestion that Reclaim could work closely with other parties, including Reform, which is the one run by Richard Tice, as you referenced.
He's the fellow that everyone wishes was Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage is involved with that party, yes. And the UK Independence Party, UKIP, who are still going.
Really?
And
what a good grief! That's all right. Have they got a new? Is it like Bucks Fizz? Have they got? Are any of the original people in UKIP anymore, or is it a completely? Listen, I've offended Bucks Fizz fans now. I just forget the lineup. The point is, some of these old acts keep touring, but there aren't that many people in it who people would recognise from the original incarnation. So what's UKIP
That's
like?
fair. Well, Neil Hamilton's still the leader.
Good God, really?
Of UKIP. And yes, he's still the leader of the party. And then you've got the SDP, the Social Democratic Party, which has, for instance, Patrick O'Flynn, the former
But
MEP.
he's the one that dragged Nigel Farage out of my studio when I was interviewing him in 2014. He's joined the SDP, so that's not an SDP that Shirley Williams and Roy Jenkins would recognise.
No, it's not the David Owen sort of party.
What is it then?
Well, they do claim to be affiliated to that original SDP group.
Right.
But, as you would suggest, I would suggest some of the members perhaps wouldn't agree with...
It's all a bit People's Front of Judea, isn't it? So UKIP, he's ex-UKIP and he's now SDP.
He's SDP.
Some of the SDP are now Reform or Replace. Replace? No, Reclaim.
Reclaim. But this is... Unfortunately, it's not going to get better, James, because...
And what happened to the Christmas tree?
Well, I don't know what happened to the Christmas tree, but on the Reclaim Party, there was suggestions of an electoral pact between all of those parties. I can confirm to you, James, that electoral pact will not be happening now. I've heard reports from within various parties that I mentioned there that sort of pact will not go on going forwards between UKIP, the SDP, Reclaim and Reform. Reports as well, and Lawrence Fox has mentioned this, that Reform have approached the donor for Reclaim to try and get him to fund their party. This is an allegation by Lawrence Fox.
Right.
But that they asked Lawrence Fox to stand aside, something he's not prepared to do. Lastly, I have approached the Reclaim Party for comment. They have declined to do so far, but the Reform Party have told me it's a sad situation, but Lawrence seems to fast be becoming an echo in a vacuum.
Well, there you go. I suppose there's worse things to be, isn't there?
Yeah, probably.
Dan Needle, of course, the man responsible, I think, for bringing Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs to the public light.
He's very hot on all things to do with that, as you know, James. He was very helpful with regards to this story in terms of pointing out exactly what the potential pitfalls were, and I sense he's a man who's going to keep playing a big role in tax to do with British politics.
Yeah, he's a very interesting contributor. I mentioned earlier, these private individuals like Alan Bates scoring rather bigger scalps, as it were, than those of us who are actually paid to do it for a living. So I don't want you to speculate unduly, but is this party funded by Jeremy Hosking Is it petering out, do we think? That seems to be the case.
It seems to be going that way.
Not with a bang, but with a whimper.
It certainly, if they don't file their accounts, according to Dan Needle, this is going to be a tricky situation for them, not least losing their membership list, but also the sort of pitfalls that come with that.
That's a shame. Henry Riley, thank you very much indeed. It is 12:48. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, for which I thank you, obviously. Do you remember when it happened shortly after the Uxbridge and Ruislip by-election, when they managed, or the Tories, I think, or the media, more so than the candidate, managed to convince constituents that the extension of ULEZ would mean they wouldn't be able to drive their cars anymore, whereas in fact, the mayor banged on about it forever, but the huge majority of cars would be compliant. And subsequently, almost within a week of that squeaky victory for the Tories, I think they got over the line by 500 votes, but they were really expecting to lose, and they thought it was all because of ULEZ. And then a week later, everybody realised that they weren't actually going to be hit with ULEZ charges because they had compliant cars anyway, and the public salience of the issue disappeared. But the Tories nonetheless decided to go all in on matters motoring. And we sat here on a couple of occasions and marvelled at the way in which it seemed that the Tories were actually framing policy with regard to transport by some of the really mad people on the internet, the kind of people that were encouraging the destruction of ULEZ cameras, or who were banging on about 15-minute cities, this idea that trying to create communities in which you could walk with ease to all of the most essential amenities was part of a vicious and sinister conspiracy to provide some sort of new world order. And we sat here, and I know I said to you on several occasions, they can't really be trying to frame transport policy according to the craziest corners of the internet, can they? And as you know, I'm cursed with an optimistic nature and a kindly demeanour, and I did honestly think, no, there must be something else going on here. Well, the deputy political editor of the Guardian newspaper, Peter Walker, reports today that, well, actually, it looks as if they might have been doing precisely that. Is that right, Peter?
It's a kind of a yes with a very slight, if I'm being fair, no. We've seen documents from inside the Department for Transport, which is when they were considering this motorists plan. They were thinking about this back in March and April. And we've seen documents which say concerns about, quote, 50-minute cities were part of the reason why they decided to deprioritise walking, cycling, and prioritise people in cars. And it seems to be that they've misunderstood the concept. I mean, I think in part they are tapping into these wilder conspiracy theories about climate lockdowns and stuff like that, but they've misunderstood what is actually quite a boring kind of urban planning concept. And they've taken it to mean like this idea that's potentially being introduced in Oxford, which is like a low traffic neighbourhood on a kind of big scale, where if you want to drive within the city centre, which is obviously massively congested by cars, you can't unless you go around the ring road. And they've taken that to mean this is what the government has previously said that they think 50-minute cities are, which is not right. But it is quite interesting and quite stark to see it written down, to see officials in the DfT say concerns about 15-minute cities is one of the reasons why we're doing this. And you think, blimey. It is quite a thing.
Because the concerns are crackerjack.
Well, the concerns are crackerjack, but more than that, they also tap into these really, really dark recesses of the internet.
This is the bit that I found fascinating, because these are people that talk about the World Economic Forum and Bill Gates. There's quite a big crossover with people who think the vaccines were some sort of conspiracy, and with people who think that ULEZ is a sort of is an exercise in population control. So with their eyes open, then the Conservatives have framed policy according to the views of these sort of characters.
They've done this in the past. Yeah. Mark Harper, the Transport Secretary, at his Conservative conference speech, some people probably remember this, part of his speech at the conference referred to 50-minute cities as places where councils can decide when and how you drive to the shops, which is simply not true. And ministers were subsequently asked, can you name any cities in the UK where this takes place? And they couldn't. And so it's very much a conscious choice to tap into this idea of the car being this unfettered freedom and it's wrong to impose rules, even though obviously rules have been part of driving ever since cars were kind of introduced. But it was notable that we got to see these documents because there's a legal case that this campaign group, the Transport Action Network, have launched into this wider.
Dale Vince is associated.
Dale
with them,
Vince is
isn't he?
helping to.
Yes.
Well, Dale Vince is helping to fund it because it's quite a pricey business, and they launched a legal case to try and look at the fact that funding for cycling and walking schemes have been cut, and they got sent this whole tranche of Department for Transport stuff, which is part of the legal case. And within that, they spotted this stuff which said, 15-minute cities are part of the plan, which struck them as being very strange. So they very kindly let me look at the documents too.
And that's where it has emerged from. So, what do you think has happened? I'm putting your political editor, sort of your op-ed hat on now, rather than your news pages hat on. Do you think it's played quite well in focus groups, or that some of the polling shows that claiming to be the motorist's friend will be effective, and therefore they've sort of invented an enemy of the motorist that they can then attack?
I think that's true in part, in the sense that I think Uxbridge gave them this idea that even in potentially urban areas, then being seen as pro-driver is a very, very good thing. But I think what's probably closer to the truth, which is kind of emblematic of quite a lot of the way that Rishi Sunak's government acts, is that they think that what is portrayed in the wilder fringes, the Daily Telegraph and Daily Mail and on the internet, is what ordinary people think.
Right.
And the kind of wider context of this is that after Uxbridge, they did this whole thing of rolling back on the net zero targets. Well, not necessarily the targets, but the way they'd reach the targets. And the polling has subsequently shown that's not a popular thing to do. So I'm not quite sure if it's that well thought out. It's definitely a reaction, trying to chase what they think is popular. But as ever with this government, they're not always doing the right thing.
So listen, that tension once again between populism and politics. The Department of Transport told you that it's important that people who choose to walk and cycle can do so safely, but this should not come at the cost of people who rely on cars or prevent the emergency services from accessing roads. I think.
That is true, but there is no evidence that these do actually the emergency.
Well, that's what I meant by the invented enemy. I mean, do you know? It's funny, really, because this has come from the mad corners of the internet. It actually reminds me of sort of 1980s phone-ins, Peter. When I started at LBC, which happily wasn't quite that long ago, the idea that everything should be about motoring, pro-motoring, look after the motorists. It was quite a popular trope, and some of the Tory policy decisions seem to be aimed at 1980s. Radio phone-ins. This would probably be one of them.
It is quite strange in the sense that for probably about 20 or 30 years, this general idea that particularly in built-up areas, you have fewer people driving for single-person short trips and more people are able to walk or cycle if they choose or use public transport. That's basically agreed in most countries around the world. And if you speak to transport experts in other countries, this idea of the plan for drivers, they're baffled by it because it is almost literally going back to ideas which were abandoned in most countries in the 60s or 70s. It's very, very strange.
And yet here we are. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. Thank you for giving us your time today. I've had something quite remarkable to happen. I've summoned Henry Riley back into the studio because a couple of people aren't happy with me for not knowing more about the curious ecosystem on the very right wing of British politics. To run through them again, there is Reclaim, Reform. Yeah. There's nothing called Replace.
No, that's
but
not a
UKIP
thing.
is still going.
UKIP.
There's the SDP as well,
SDP.
which has got. And is that it?
Well, yeah. Well, that's it. It's just those four mostly.
And Bridgen all on his own now as an independent.
So he's not part of.
I suggested to you that it was a little bit like Bucks Fizz, who go on tour with a lineup that is not the same as the lineup they had during their heyday. True or false?
Oh no.
Jay Aston, former Bucks Fizz member, stood as a candidate for the Brexit Party.
For MEP. I should have pointed this out to you at the time, yes. That is true.
How am I supposed to satirise this stuff? Honestly, that was a random band that I happen to know has had some conflicts about the lineup and who gets to use the name, and there she is. detailing how she lost friends after she decided to stand for the Brexit. And forgive me again, what's the Brexit Party called now?
So the Brexit Party is now Reform,
right,
which is led by Richard Tice.
That's the bloke who kind of accosted me at a London champagne bar on an infamous occasion. The one that so he's Farage's friend.
Yeah, well, I wasn't there, but
no, I know, but he's got nothing to do with Lewis.
So he's got nothing to do with Lawrence Fox's party, although...
And that's the one with the Christmas tree problem.
That's the one where Andrew Bridgen borrowed the company car and Lawrence Fox wanted it back for a Christmas tree.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yes. But also, James, the reason there's confusion is Reform didn't stand for Mayor of London because Lawrence Fox stood from Reclaim. So they do sometimes stand aside for one another.
Right. And the Bucks Fizz singer did stand for the Brexit Party. That's not a joke.
No, that's true.
And that's it. You've been listening to James O'Brien on LBC, for which I thank you. If you missed any of today's show, and there was quite a lot to get through, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio. You'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as all the best video clips from LBC and other global stations. Pause and rewind live radio on Global Player, where you're always in control. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC is Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
You know that thing where you create a porn star name from various elements of names?
Oh, this has taken an unexpected turn.
There's a female Brexit candidate version of that I made up myself.
Go on.
You choose, and Jay Ashton falls into this category. You choose the name of one of your aunties.
Yeah.
And I think Jay can be Jane, can't it? You choose the name of one of your aunties, and then the surname is a childhood shop that you used to know very well.
Elsie Woolworth.
There you go.
That's very good.
Jocelyn Londis.
Oh, fantastic.
You can play this all day.
Mine was...
Here's a podcast waiting to happen.
Anne Atkinson. Fantastic.
I think she's real.
She does. It works, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
I'm telling you, stick with me. It's all happening here. 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 It's all happening here.